The luxurious mansion was lost in a fog. It was the perfect night to lose one's life under the wheels of a car. The question of how it all began remained frozen in her green eyes. What ended here is in blood. The face of the approaching spectator, distorted by horror, explained nothing. She herself exclaimed, "Why did they bring her down? Because if her sister dies, there will be no one left to compose new compositions for them." Her interlocutor replied that it was time to leave. Otherwise, they might get into trouble. In her final moments, the girl, covered in blood, looked at her murderers, her sister, and her younger brother. Then another man approached. "Wow," said the one who was her husband. "Forgive me, Ariana," he said, standing next to the dying woman, and he added that he might have truly loved her once. Even then, Ariana seemed incredibly boring to him. Now he could hug the one who was more flirtatious and interesting. The faces of both sisters were almost identical, and Ariana's husband believed his sister was full of deceit. And now that she was asking for forgiveness, there was no sincerity in it. She simply wanted to announce that she was pregnant with Ariana's husband. But Ariana considered these people her family. The brother noticed that Ariana was losing a lot of blood. He even asked if she was okay, but he was only concerned about the possibility of taking fingerprints. This is what she did in her last moments of life. Then, the brother thanked Ariana with a mocking smile, assuring her that her property would be in good hands. Ariana was absolutely betrayed by everyone. Her brother promised to play the requiem she had composed at her funeral. Ariana pleaded with all her might that she just needed one more time. She wanted one more chance. With this thought, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she couldn't help but scream. The fruit plate was snatched from her hands and fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The maid rushed to help her, worried that her mistress might be hurt. Ariana couldn't remember why she was preparing all that. She even asked the maid Sophie, and she explained that they were having tea with the Marquis of Pettigrew today. That was the name of Ariana's husband. Only the maid spoke, as if the wedding had not yet taken place. But she was touched that Ariana already called him her husband. She said the Marquis was already in the garden, and the lady could go to him. But Ariana remembered that she and Lucas had been married for 5 years. Moreover, these memories were so realistic. Thinking about this, Ariana went out to the garden. She thought maybe it was just a dream. But then she noticed the garden decorations, which were popular 5 years ago. Perhaps they were deathbed hallucinations. Enough. Enough. It came from somewhere in the garden. A female voice assured that she was not in the mood today. The girl said she heard the wedding date had been set, and she was terribly upset about it. But the man asked Alina not to worry, because that meant that from now on they would live under the same roof. Ariana didn't know if it was a dream or not, but now she understood that the relationship between these two began even before the wedding. It turns out this hypocrisy has been going on for a long time. At that moment, Ariana was called. It was her brother. He wanted to know where she was. He told the girl to go to her room after tea. Maybe she forgot about it. But today they had a lesson. Count Lopez's family was famous for its musical talent. However, Edward did not inherit it. And now he angrily asked Ariana why she was silent after having suggested joint lessons, in which she supposedly corrected her sister's compositions. In fact, he simply stole them, and they were all presented at the Lopez family opera, built by her maternal grandfather. The younger sister Alina sang. Ariana watched everything from the audience. She was aware of the situation, but she was not against living for them. She asked her brother what day it was today. It was November 27, 325. It was the year in which Ariana's death was still 5 years away. Now she has a great opportunity to take revenge on them all and protect her music. Ariana told her brother that she suddenly had a great idea for a composition and suggested that they listen to it. She decided that this time, she would be the one to throw everyone into the abyss. The brother agreed. Although he said he didn't think it was good for him, he said that Ariana still knew nothing about music and that the girl was going to play a melody that came to mind when she was dying from blood loss. She said her brother was right and that she was a complete zero compared to him. The brother was glad she realized this, as that was her only advantage. He told her to play enthusiastically, to hear what kind of inspiration had suddenly come to her. Ariana tried to remember what kind of music she preferred at that time, but more important was to understand what she should do with the family she loved. She will have the willpower to take revenge on them. She played a melody, and everyone in the mansion heard it. These were the sounds that made everyone freeze and turn around. Ariana continued playing. "Ma'am," "That was wonderful," exclaimed the maid. She assured that it was the best performance she had ever heard. The Marquis asked what Ariana had just played. He came from the garden carrying leaves with him. Ariana replied that it was improvised. Elena also said that her sister's composition turned out great, and Ariana pointed out that Elena's voice would fit this song well. But Elena replied that her vocal range was a bit low for such high notes. Ariana laughed and expressed her regret. Then she said she had just found the perfect name. "This will be the area of adultery." Elena asked if that name was too vulgar. Ariana asked her if she really thought it would be too much, and Elena was sure of it. But Ariana replied that she thought it would be perfect. Elena asked her sister what she meant by that, and Ariana replied that the name was better precisely because it was vulgar. Ariana pointed out that throughout history, it has been passions that have captivated human hearts. But this did not convince Elena that it was possible to give the work such a title. My brother said he also liked the idea. He thought Ariana was right. It would definitely create a stir. But Elena said to hell with the stir if the name was too weird. The brother suggested giving it a try after all. Ariana said that no one can sing this aria except Elena. It took Elena some time to find an answer. Ariana left her and asked if she could go up now to continue her work. For now, she felt she could write it. From the overture to the final aria. Write all of that. The brother clarified in advance and ordered that when she finished, she should bring it to him so he could improve it. The Marquis, who overheard the conversation, said that this time Ariana would take responsibility for the opera from beginning to end. The girl promised to do everything in her power to write it. She thought that this time she would not allow her compositions to be taken away from her. Elena indignantly asked if the Marquis was really going to stage an opera with such scandalous content. He replied that this performance was very important. After all, Dante Heisenberg has returned to the capital, and to welcome him, a grand show will be held at Paradise Palace, so they shouldn't let all the glory be stolen from them. This performance was supposed to be a sensation. Ariana thought about Dante Heisenberg. Suddenly, this man was her opportunity. She asked if Dante would really return to the capital. The Marquis noticed that this time there was a trace of blood behind him. They say he simply defeated some barbarians. The Marquis looked at Elena and commented that his future sister-in-law would be well advised to stay away from such a man. Elena replied that she knew, because they said his life was as decadent as if he invited singers to his bedroom every night. Paradise was actually a cabaret, while the Lopez Opera was a place for refined entertainment for the nobility. Paradise was a place of entertainment, where common people drank and watched shows, a place that became a refuge for the most fallen. And Dante Heisenberg was the owner of Paradise and a war hero whose hands were covered in blood up to his elbows. He once asked Ariana why she was wasting her talent, enriching those who didn't understand how valuable her gift was. He suggested the girl stop being stupid and come with him, because only she would be able to cut his talent like a precious stone. Dante was the only one who noticed that Ariana's family was exploiting her skills. She was supposed to meet him. This thought led Ariana to Paradise. It was the first time she had visited this refuge for the fallen. They noticed her immediately and asked who she was looking for there. Dante's aide approached her. Ariana introduced herself and asked if she could see his lordship. The young man hesitated, because unfortunately his lordship does not meet anyone without an appointment. Ariana asked him to tell him that she was only asking for 5 minutes of his time. If she fails to interest him during this time, he will make up for it. "All right," said the Duke. He realized that the lady was begging him for 5 minutes. "Pleased to meet you, Your Highness," said Ariana. She said she had come to offer him something. Dante said they could end the conversation there, because he didn't think she could offer him anything. But Ariana had one thing with her. She asked for a moment to explain everything. Dante looked skeptically at the kalimba in the girl's hands. Ariana began to play the melody. The first notes made Dante freeze. The melody of the kalimba filled the room. The sounds flowed freely from Ariana's fingers. The girl concentrated on the game. Finally, she opened her eyes. Was that not enough? 5 billion cardins. The Duke ordered that the melody be given to her on the condition that all parties were present. Ariana thought that 5 billion for a musical piece was an incredibly generous offer, but she thanked the Duke out loud because it was not the price she wanted. She had completely different ambitions. She was going to become the Duke's wife. Dante did not expect this. After making her proposal, Ariana froze. The Duke asked her if she was going to exchange a musical piece for the position of his wife. Ariana pointed out that if she ever heard music in the Lopez house, she wrote all those compositions. Dante commented that he had always believed the Count wrote them all. That's not true, replied Ariana. She wrote all the music and her brother only made minor changes. Ha, okay, to be honest, exclaimed the Duke. The offer seemed tempting and the interlocutor interesting. Ariana added that she wanted to take all her compositions from her brother, but the laws of the empire prevented her from doing so. According to this law, an unmarried woman cannot own private property, including copyrights. Dante realized that the girl wanted to use him as a shield before the law to prevent her music from being taken away in favor of her brother. He understood everything correctly. Just for a year, said Ariana, until she finds a way to protect her music and complete her revenge. If Dante takes her as his wife, she will become the exclusive composer for Paradise. The Duke commented that the position of his wife was worth more than $5 billion. Ariana reminded him that he was now looking for an excuse to avoid the princess's proposal. He could use Ariana as a future wife. It's a simple and elegant excuse to reject the princess. She also won't ask him for anything, and he won't have to satisfy her material needs. Dante said you shouldn't hide your cards when playing with him. To protect her brother's music, Ariana needed legal protection, but the Duke wanted to know if she needed anything else. She had one more request. She asked Dante to pretend that he really loved her. The Duke laughed and said he liked the audacity of Ariana Lopez, although the girl hadn't told him her name yet. But the last condition did not suit him. He will not pretend. A bad imitation is worse than nothing, even for a temporary deal. As long as Ariana takes his place as his wife, she will have to play her role sincerely. He asked her what she thought of such a proposal, and if she didn't agree, she could still run away. This man was trying to scare Ariana, but now she couldn't turn back. She said she was fine with this proposal. The Duke looked into her eyes and almost hugged her. Relax, Ariana, he said, pulling her closer. He thought she was not suitable for the role of prey about to be devoured. I'm relaxed, said the girl. Their gazes met. The Duke let her go, saying she had character. As he left, he promised to discuss all the details soon. Ariana was perplexed. Dante remained with his aide. He asked why he pretended not to know the lady. After all, he even visited the opera. Dante told his aide to shut up, that he only went to the opera for fun. But it was a 2-hour performance. Ariana Lopez wanted to pretend she didn't know the Duke, although maybe in reality she had forgotten him. Dante himself did not know which of these options was more scandalous to him. Ariana returned home. Now it was time to catch her breath. This man absorbed all her energy in a single encounter, and she was going to become his wife, and now she didn't know if it would be a good idea. Dante was the man Lucas envied the most, and the man Alina desired the most. So Ariana needs this person. But towards the end of the meeting, she really got nervous. If she hadn't known his secret, she would have been much more frightened. Ariana was greeted by an excited maid. She reported that Marquis Peregrine was already here. He had been sitting in the living room for about 2 hours. It was strange what he could be doing there without his fiancée. Well, she will change her clothes and ask. Alina appeared, and the maid told her there was a gift for her. Alina was delighted that her admirer sent her jewelry from Pier. Then she noticed Ariana. Alina asked where her sister had gone, since the Marquis had almost wasted his time. She had been away for so long, but she had nothing to worry about, because Alina had taken care of entertaining the guest. Ariana thanked her, but advised Alina to be more careful next time. Alina asked why. Ariana recalled that an unmarried girl should not spend too much time with her sister's fiancé. Since rumors might start, Alina asked her not to say such things, because they were simply spending time together as members of the same family. After all, the Marquis greatly appreciates Alina's talent, even comparing it to a precious jewel. No one understands the artistic nature like the Marquis. She asked Ariana to accept it even if she didn't like it, and Ariana remembered that she always said something like that. It was as if there was a special relationship between her and Lucas that Ariana could not understand. Not a romance between a man and a woman, but a higher, creative connection. Artistic nature, said Ariana. She asked if Alina had learned all the different rhythms, but she knew it was a miracle that her sister had learned the notes with her brain. Huh, said Alina. She hurried to leave, since her sister was not in the mood today. She would go down first, so Ariana could change and rest on the sofa. Ariana had no idea what Alina and Lucas did on that sofa. Ariana remained alone in the room. She approached that same sofa. Her attention focused on 2 hairs left on the pillow. red and light hair intertwined. It was really amusing. Ariana went down to the hall, where Alina's singing could already be heard. She noticed that her sister was a bit off-key, but Alina thought they were making fun of her. After this, Ariana greeted the guest. The Marquis asked her why she had to wait so long for him, and she replied by offering to share good news. Ariana reported that Alina seemed to have a lover, and showed a hair she found in the dressing room. Alina and the Marquis were alarmed. Ariana noticed that the Marquis had the same hair color. Then she asked him if it belonged to him. Maybe the Marquis entered her dressing room. "Yes, that's right," exclaimed Lucas. He explained that he was so bored waiting for her that he went to look at his fiancée's wardrobe. He saw nothing surprising in it. Why shouldn't he be interested in his future wife's wardrobe? Ariana, he said. She was very spontaneous, and since their wedding was approaching, he had to buy her a nice dress. And some jewelry wouldn't hurt either. Ariana realized that he was clearly trying to distract her by talking about dresses and jewelry. She asked out loud if this was true. Lucas replied that his future wife deserved such a gift. The butler approached and announced that a messenger from Master Pier had arrived. Ariana pretended to be surprised. Then she turned to Lucas and assumed that he had called the repairman for her. "I'm so happy," Ariana said to Lucas. She seemed not to notice that Alina had become gloomier than a storm cloud. In the box brought by the master, there was a set of sparkling jewelry. The master was very happy to please the lady. He showed with what care they had engraved the initials the client had requested. Ariana guessed whose initials they would be. Most likely they belonged to Alina, not Ariana Lopez. The girl rejoiced out loud that the adornment had her initials, and said she was touched by how the Marquis had managed to prepare everything. Lucas was surprised by Ariana's smile. Her beautiful but usually sad face looked completely different with such a bright smile. He said he prepared all this for her, because when she is happy, he is also happy. Ariana looked at the earrings and the bracelet. The master said they would look very good together. The master noted that the lady had excellent taste. These decorations were usually bought as a set. And Ariana happily thanked the Marquis for such a gift. Lucas assured that this was a gesture of his sincerity towards Ariana. He was afraid to imagine how much all this would cost him. "I have to go," said Alina. She was going to take singing lessons. When the door slammed shut, Lucas thought it wasn't easy to satisfy the desires of two women at once. But he could give Alina another necklace. Ariana understood what was going on in the hearts of these two. The girl looked at the jewelry and felt very strange. She couldn't even dream of such luxurious things when she was the Marquise of Pettigrew. Lucas was very stingy, even in matters like servants' wages. Ariana asked Wilhelm, the butler, how much the set could be sold for, and he said 50 million catons. Ariana ordered everything to be sold, and Wilhelm was surprised that she was doing it with the Marquis's gift. The girl asked him to keep it a secret, and also to find a good informant guild for her. Ariana herself went to the city. She had important matters. In the building she entered, a young man told her that the owner was absent today, so they were closed. Then he recognized the visitor. He didn't think he would find her here. Therefore, he rushed to hide his face under the hood. Ariana said she wanted to make a request and asked if they were working. When the young man spoke again, she noticed that his voice had changed. The young man declared that his name was Leonard, and that he was the owner of that guild. Since it was supposed to be kept secret which family really ruled, here it should remain secret for Lady Lopez. Ariana said she wanted proof of her fiancé's infidelity. This request surprised the interlocutor. She replied that her fiancé was cheating on her with her younger sister, and that she wanted to find out by doing this and break off the engagement. She didn't understand why this man was so surprised. Love triangles are the main source of income for information guilds, and they surprise no one. Ariana said that her fiancé and sister were not shy about meeting in the garden or in her dressing room, so it shouldn't be difficult to find them. She also heard that this guild actively uses cameras. At that time, photography was still a recent invention, but in the following years, it would become increasingly popular. But many people believe that taking pictures is dangerous and try to avoid cameras because they say the soul can get trapped in a photo. This was to Ariana's benefit, because Alina and Lucas couldn't even imagine that their shameful acts would end up in a photo. Ariana asked to take a picture of them together over the course of 2 weeks. She wants to have time to break off this engagement and arrange a new one within this period. The young man felt that jumping from one engagement to another so quickly was a tough decision. He asked if the lady's new husband would be someone reliable after all. It was hard to imagine better revenge against an ex than living in a new marriage and having children, but Ariana replied that none of that. She said she would not have physical relations with her new husband. After all, her new fiancé is impotent. This discouraged her interlocutor, but he assured that her request would be completed on time. It was a very nervous meeting for him. When the visitor left, another employee asked when Sir Leo had returned. He replied that he was leaving again, that he had some business to attend to. The employee reminded him that this was his job, not Leo's. He didn't understand why he was taking on that task. They realized that their conversation was being watched. It was His Excellency. The interlocutors didn't know he had overheard the conversation. They asked him how long he had been there, and the Duke pointed out that he had not managed to impress the woman. Now he wondered why Ariana assumed he was impotent. Leo also didn't know where Lady Lopez could get such thoughts. She said she wasn't nervous. He thought she was a shameless woman who believed she couldn't harm him. It was a complete surprise how she dared. At that moment, Ariana was walking down the street, thinking it's time to get to work. She had 3 main goals. She had already visited the Informant Guild, so you'll have to talk to Dante about the marriage contract and finding a suitable soprano. Finding a soprano was key. Ariana will completely destroy the Lopez opera and her family. They will have no chance to recover. The instrument of her revenge will be the music she writes. But the quality of the music doesn't matter if no one listens to it. And it must be said that Alina was a great performer. 5 years later, she would become the best in the empire. Except for one person. Ariana had an idea where to find this man. She hoped she was right. Suddenly, she heard some noises. Someone was crying with such a beautiful voice. Ariana decided to take a look. Even if it was just crying, the volume and resonance are impressive. At that time, Alina had a favorite hobby. She loved to trample on the hopes of aspiring singers. Alina said that if Rosalina's singing was considered good, then even a pigeon could become an excellent vocalist. That her hair looks like a dried rose. This was exactly the hair color of the crying girl. Ariana asked her if she was okay, because if she sat like that, she would catch a cold. Ariana wrapped the girl in her cloak. The girl said that the lady was so kind that she promised to return the favor. Ariana looked at how Rosalina looked at that age. She asked what the girl was doing there. Rosalina replied that she had always dreamed of being a singer. One day, she had the opportunity to achieve it. She received an offer to perform a song at Paradise, owned by Duke Heisenberg. It was a happy night, and Rosalina met the most famous singer of our time, who approached her and asked if her companion was her lover. The singer said that Rosalina's boyfriend is a pretty good musician, but it's a shame his voice ruins his performance. Rosalina didn't hear anything good for her, but she didn't pay attention to these words. But she thought she would have time to prepare properly for the performance. However, her lover suddenly disappeared. He left only a letter saying that he had met his true love. After hearing Rosalina's story, Ariana thought it was probably Alina's doing. Rosalina said she had been looking for a musician, but no one wanted to play for an amateur like her. It was so unfair to have to miss such an opportunity, but there was nothing she could do about it. Ariana extended her hand and asked when. Rosalina wondered who this lady was. She had such beautiful hair. Ariana asked what time the performance at Paradise was scheduled for. Rosalina said from 4 to 5. Not much time left. Get up, we have to go on stage, said Ariana. She told the girl to warm up and sing, and that she would take care of the rest. She will accompany her. Rosalind only has to sing, but she was going to perform a rather difficult aria about possession. Ariana pointed out that it was a melody with many nuances. Rosalina was worried that she hadn't said that, because the wonderful stranger might run away for fear of something too complicated. But she could also take a step back and sing some children's song if she could do it on stage. She assured that any other song would do. Ariana replied that they would go with the first option. The aria of possession was the first piece played in the Lopez Opera House. The main aria. The accompaniment was complex due to the key change, which symbolized the heroine's emotional state. Rosalina was surprised that the stranger was satisfied with the song. Ariana said that she herself wrote this piece, so they ended up in Paradise. Ariana looked around. This is what Paradise looked like at that time. The stage is in a terrible state. This was to be expected, as Paradise was not officially a concert hall. What was surprising was that 5 years later, it would be him who would shake the entire empire. There were rumors that Dante had no intention of appreciating Paradise. His interest was not in shows or opera, but in music itself. In any case, they won't be able to perform in such a setting. Ariana turned to the maid. She said she would like to change seats. After all, this one was too close to the audience, and the spotlight was not where it should be. And if you look at the stage, the light fell in a completely inappropriate way. Everything was arranged in a completely uncomfortable way, both for the singer and for the audience. It was disadvantageous for everyone. Everyone was surprised by the ardor of the unknown woman who really planned to accompany them today. And the singer turned out to be a discreet country girl. For some reason, her nose was red, like a tomato. But it didn't matter. If her level was too low, they would simply interrupt her halfway through. The audience whispered about the new singer's performance. No one had heard of her before, and now everyone assumed she was just some kind of fool. Rosalina took to the stage full of determination. Finally, she had the opportunity to demonstrate her talent. She had to face it, and she would do everything in her power. With the help of her benefactor, she will be able to succeed. Ariana looked at Rosalina and then began to play a melody. Everything was clear from the first notes. This lady's performance was special. Now Rosalind also had not to make a mistake. Rosalina pressed her hand to her chest and began to sing. Your gaze and your breath, I want them to be mine. These were the words of the aria about possession. It was the story of a great seductress. She accidentally ended up in a temple and fell in love with a priest. She understood the true desire to possess, which neither jewels nor handsome young men can awaken. And so she rejoices, declaring to everyone that she wants to possess all his life, even if it dulls its shine. I want you so much, why can't we be together? Sang Rosalina. The audience was amazed by the singing, but even more so by the performance of the accompanist. More and more people occupied their places near the stage. Rosalina thought the next line was very important. It speaks of how the heroine fully understands her feverish first love. If only you could be mine, sang Rosalina. At that moment, something happened to her throat. It might have been because she had been sitting in the cold for so long. She didn't know what to do, because now she would have to reach a very high note. When the accompaniment fades, everyone will hear her voice break. But suddenly, Rosalina heard Ariana exclude that line from the song. She turned to her benefactor, who winked at her. Ariana bought some time, and her playing style was so beautiful that it was hard to believe one could improvise so easily. Rosalina thought she could. She must sing for the sake of her benefactor. I will never regret it. I will only be by your side, sang Rosalina. Then she froze, looking at the audience. There was applause. Rosalina was happy. Ariana also looked at her with joy. The audience said that this singer is simply fascinating. She has an incredible voice. She can reach notes as high as the prominent vocalist Elena Lopez. Some doubted that On Possession had always sounded like this, but the long passage was so harmonious as if it had always been there. Everyone was curious about who was accompanying them, but the person's face was hidden by a hood. Lord Lopez, it could be. Rosalina thought her benefactor said she had written that aria. So it turns out she was Lord Edward Lopez. Ariana said her real name with a smile. Another person approached the girl. Ariana recognized him. It was Dante. He also identified the girl and said that she had found inspiration. He asked if she had used his establishment to promote a new singer. It was true. Ariana wanted to give her some kind of reputation if she had to face Elena in a soprano battle. In the near future, Ariana apologized to the Duke if he felt offended by her performance without his permission. But Dante said she could use everything she had, because he was also going to use her to the fullest. Rosalina was in shock. It was the Duke himself. It was not clear what was happening. Dante whispered to Ariana that it wasn't so bad. The girl felt like she was about to be devoured, but it must have been another test. She said out loud that she was not afraid at all. Dante realized that she was a tough nut to crack and wanted to make her pay for her insolence. But they were still engaged, so it was possible to postpone everything until the wedding. At this moment in another place, Edward sat at the gambling table. He said he had a good feeling and went all in. Elias Rayner, an investor in the Lopez Opera Theater, distracted him. He called him to another part of the hall. Tomorrow, the first rehearsal of the opera for the San Bernardino Festival will take place. Rayner suggested that Edward shouldn't be in the hall at such a late hour. Edward thought that Rayner acted so arrogantly and bossily only because he was an investor. He could have fun because the composition was finished. Now it was the musician's turn. Rayner replied that after hearing the new version of the aria about possession, he looked forward to the performance. Edward didn't know anything about the new version, but Rayner assured him that it sounded even better than the original. "I'm sorry," said Edward. Rainer said the original was magnificent, but he always thought the flute part in the last movement was a bit superfluous. In the new version, this part was removed and replaced with an extended interlude. This outraged Edward because he was the author of the flute part, which was now considered superfluous. But Rainer's opinion should not outrage us, since it was he who helped the Lopez Opera Theater achieve success. The next morning in the mansion, Alina was reading a new newspaper. It said that Duke Heisenberg had openly shown interest in the mysterious woman. It was the Duke's first known public romance, but no one knew who the lady was. Alina choked with rage. How could the Duke flirt not with a princess, but with some tramp? If so, then there was something unclear. Alina saw him from the stage during the performance. The Duke was here again. He looked at her without taking his eyes off her. He definitely came to see Alina. She told the maid to invite the Duke to the reception. He could be Alina's companion, but he ignored her and didn't even send a refusal. This was a reason for ridicule, because she said she would come with the Duke but appeared alone. Because there is no need for such a busy person to come here with her. The maid asked the young lady not to worry so much. After all, the star of the opera was not an unknown singer, but Alina Lopez. Alina asked what she was talking about. The maid simply assumed she was upset about the headline, but Alina only paid attention after these words. The successful debut of the singer Rosaline Tenor was written there. Rosaline was that simple girl. Alina tricked that girl's boyfriend to ruin her performance, but she still made her debut. It was incredibly exasperating. Music was heard above the opera house. The musicians have already started rehearsing. It was conducted by Ariana Lopez. This irritated Alina. Ariana wasn't even the main composer, but she acted as if she were in charge. Alina didn't understand how someone like her sister could become a marchioness. But if it weren't for her status, if Alina's mother had been at least a lower-class noble. At that moment, a dull groan was heard nearby. It was Edward who appeared, and looking at him, Alina asked how much her brother had drunk yesterday, and he demanded that she not make noise, as it irritated him. Alina decided to mock him, as she felt very bad. She said she thought her little sister had changed a little, and Edward replied that she looked as pathetic and empty as always. Alina pointed out how Ariana was strutting around as if she were the main composer. Every time, Edward walked away for a minute. "What?" asked Edward. Alina asked if he had reinforced the cello part, since her brother had written that piece. Only he could rework it. But the musicians were so obedient to Ariana. Edward was furious. Ariana was completely absorbed in the music. Edward roughly pushed her. The girl fell to the floor. Edward shouted that Ariana understood nothing about this and did not dare to interfere. Then he asked the musicians why professionals listen to an amateur. He told them to start everything again. Then again from the beginning. Edward said the violins were out of tune. "They are too loud. I'll have to rely on my instincts, no matter what this girl has scribbled." Edward shouted that everyone was fired. "This piece doesn't need that many violins." At that moment, someone hit Edward on the back of the head. He collapsed unconscious. Ariana said that his voice was out of tune, too loud for a drunkard. Sometime before this is what happened. Among the musicians, there was a violinist named Ruben. His arm hurt a lot, but he couldn't stop playing. But he didn't have enough money, not even to repair the house, let alone go to the doctor. The violin was the only inheritance his noble mother left him, so he had to perform in such a way that no one noticed he was suffering. If Edward noticed, he would simply fire him. Edward appeared even angrier than before. He told me to start over again and again. Ruben did his best, but Edward didn't like it and demanded to play again. Starting over was inconceivable torture. Ruben had to endure all this. It was just a small injury. He could go to the doctor as soon as the show was over. But playing for a long time can worsen the injury. Edward shouted that the violins were out of tune because they were too loud, and then he fired everyone. Ruben realized that next month, he would simply have nothing to live on. This simply couldn't happen. Ruben jumped up to protest, but he simply didn't have time. With a sweet smile, Ariana suggested putting an end to this useless rehearsal. "Your brother doesn't remember anything after getting drunk, so he can forget about firing you." Ariana approached Ruben and asked him to show her his hand. She noticed that he had a wound on his arm. She knew because the sound of his violin trembled slightly. Ariana gave him money so he could go to the doctor, who would prescribe him medicine so that it would disappear in a couple of days. Ariana looked at the musicians. They were all exhausted. Edward always took it out on the musicians as if he were a tyrant, so they simply couldn't tell him if they were injured. Because if Edward found out, he would simply fire them. It was unacceptable that talented musicians were intimidated this way. Ariana could no longer ignore it. She asked them if they were happy with the treatment they received at the opera. The musicians exchanged glances. Ariana modestly admitted that, in fact, all the achievements of the Lopez opera were entirely her merit. The musicians didn't understand what she was talking about. Ariana explained that the M-Lady aria that everyone knew was an arranged version. And then she showed the original. Everyone was shocked by the sound. It was an order of magnitude better. Incredible emotions were conveyed through the music. Ruben realized that she was the true composer of the House of Lopez. Ariana offered the musicians a new job in an orchestra that she herself will conduct. Not her brother. The musicians must not have trusted her yet, so she had to convince them and offered them a much better salary than they currently received. Louis, the conductor of the Lopez Orchestra, immediately said that he wanted to join Ariana's orchestra. Ruben said that he wanted it too and asked to take him with him. Many people also wanted to play Miss Ariana's music. It was a victory, but I had to think about Edward. The musicians said they would take care of the Count. They will do everything as it should be. The lady will not have to worry about the consequences and just move on. Ariana was happy to provide it. All the musicians signed contracts with her. She was glad to be able to assemble the orchestra as planned. She also received a letter from the Informant Guild in York. The red color means the request has been completed. Now Ariana could see what kind of picture they had taken. The video was quite explicit. Lucas's betrayal was proven. Elena was also recognizable. There were so many of these pictures. The executor of the York Guild did an impressive job, but both were probably not particularly discreet. The man from the guild reported that they had learned something else. Elena Lopez visits the pharmacist. Women who know unsuitable men often go to pharmacies. In her past life, Elena was pregnant with Lucas's child. She must be buying contraceptives now. The prescription could serve as proof. The man from the guild objected that it was the exact opposite. Elena Lopez was prescribed a fertility drug. This surprised Ariana. The girl thought about this while walking down the dark street. Elena was trying to get pregnant. She planned it all from the beginning. Her lies, Lucas's seduction. Until she became pregnant with his child, Ariana thought that a family capable of murder could do something more. "It seems my fiancé likes night walks," said a voice nearby. It was Dante, holding a stranger by the neck. When Ariana asked who it was, the Duke threw the stranger away. He said that Ariana didn't realize that they were being followed. This man was following her. She had no idea. The Duke dealt with him easily. Dante noticed that it was obvious to everyone that such a rich lady would be an attractive target, especially when she has connections with such an influential person. He was right. Ariana completely forgot about caution and apologized. She will not make that mistake again. Dante asked her why she was crying. Ariana was not crying. Dante was mistaken. She was just a little tired. Preparing for the wedding requires more energy than expected. Dante agreed that it was very difficult when you have not one, but two suitors. He wanted to know when Ariana would get rid of the excess. She planned to complete all the preparations for her wedding to Luca's Pettigrew on time and leave him at the altar on the day of the ceremony. Dante suggested doing something even crazier. For example, he could ruin the wedding by declaring that he was against it, or maybe grab her wrist and kiss her in front of everyone. Why isn't Ariana a little more honest? She was afraid to go to that wedding alone. Dante said he couldn't be sure he could get away unscathed from that situation. To be honest, Ariana was scared. She didn't know what Lucas was capable of in a fit of anger, but she couldn't ask his lordship to come to the wedding. She thanked Dante and assured him that she could handle it. Dante didn't argue. Another day, the girl tried on a bracelet. She admired her wrist thoughtfully. The jeweler said that rubies look even more impressive on such clean skin. He pointed out that not every gentleman could afford this type of jewelry. Lucas affirmed that they would take everything his fiancée wanted, and it should be noted that his show was already complete. To flaunt the latter was the most obvious reason for such sudden generosity. Ariana hadn't slept much the night before. She was tired and now just wanted to go home. Lucas, looking at her, decided that she was touched, but her eyes were full of tears because she kept yawning. Lucas thought that Ariana's moved expression was quite cute. He announced that once married, his Marchioness would have dozens of trinkets like these. Lucas laughed. Yes, the decoration was expensive, but worth it. Besides, soon his wallet will be full again. He was not wrong to invest in the House of Lopez. Once the show gains recognition, thanks to Ariana's work, it will take a place on the main stage of the festival, and his investment will be rewarded 100 times over. These pleasant thoughts were interrupted by an enraged horse. Lucas was scared to death. Panicked, he pushed Ariana. The girl fell and he started running. The horse reared up. Someone picked up Ariana. He managed to move her away from the deadly hooves. It was Dante. He asked if the girl was hurt. Ariana asked him how he did it. Dante realized that he couldn't leave her alone, not for a minute, without her getting into trouble. He asked her if she would refuse his help now. All she needs to do is tell him she needs him and stop trying to solve things on her own. There was nothing to answer to that. Dante reminded her that she could use everything she had. Ariana felt her heart beating faster, but she didn't understand if it was because of the surprise or the man next to her. Dante hugged her tightly. She said she would send him a wedding invitation. Dante smiled. He will be delighted to attend. Lucas barely caught his breath after escaping. He didn't understand where this horse came from. He didn't understand where Ariana had gone. The girl was in another man's arms. Bystanders saw how his lordship saved her life. Ladies whispered that the Duke was even more handsome in life than they imagined. It was unclear why this attractive and caring man had the nickname the Butcher. Lucas was angry because they humiliated him because of a stupid animal. He ran to Ariana, exclaiming that his beloved must have been terribly scared. The Duke blocked Lucas's path, overwhelming him with his height. Dante asked if the Lopez family's sense of nobility allowed them to endanger a woman for the sake of their own skin. Lucas did not expect ridicule. He shouted that he would swear he was trying to save Ariana. He grabbed her hand. He assured that he would have saved her if it weren't for the Duke's intervention. Suddenly, he saw that the garnet bracelet was missing from the girl's wrist. If it slipped off when the girl fell, then such a large stone should be visible. He ran to look for it. Fortunately, the bracelet was easy to find. Dante offered Lady Lopez to buy her a new bracelet. Lucas objected that his lordship had no need to give jewelry to his fiancée. He could buy a new one himself. Although deep down, he was indignant to think that after such an expensive purchase, he would have to spend money again. At that moment, an aide ran up to Dante and told him that they had to leave immediately. If they delayed even a minute, they wouldn't make it to the audience with His Highness. Dante asked Ariana to let him know if the incident had harmed her in any way, and she thanked him. Dante kissed her hand as a farewell and expressed his hope for a quick meeting. Lucas was angry because the Duke had just flirted with his woman. He trembled with rage, noticing the lustful glances the Duke cast towards Ariana. Lucas noticed that Ariana was really attractive. In fact, she was even more beautiful than Helena. He had never felt such a strong desire to possess Ariana before. He could understand why the Duke fell in love with her at first sight. But to his lordship's regret, Ariana belonged to him. Lucas offered to accompany Ariana home, then spend the night and visit her chambers after dark. For Ariana, it was as if the horse had taken away the last of her sanity. "I'm sorry," said Ariana. Ariana's shoulder, still hurt from the push Lucas had given her when the horse charged them, so she would walk home alone. Lucas agreed that if she was hurt, she should rest. Ariana said goodbye and left. Lucas realized that the ridicule hadn't made him angry, but had made him desire her even more. Ariana will belong to him forever after the wedding in 5 days. He will make her scream his name with those pretty lips. And so the long-awaited day arrived. Ariana put on a wedding dress. Sophie the maid exclaimed that she looked stunning. She was even worried that that slug Lucas would fall in love with the lady again. She was so pretty that Sophie got angry. Ariana told her, and the butler Wilhelm about Alina and Lucas's romance. Sophie was beside herself with indignation. Ariana explained that this is why she is not planning to marry him. Instead, she will marry the Duke of Heidenberg. Wilhelm didn't understand what she wanted. Ariana asked him if he missed the days when the Lopez name was synonymous with musical talent. During her contract with Duke Heidenberg, she intends to restore the former glory of the Lopez name, and for this she needed help. Sophie said she would always be on her mistress's side. She was about to comb Ariana's hair, but the comb was snatched from her hands. Alina entered the room and noticed that Ariana's pale skin made her look like a ghost in that dress. Ariana replied that her sister looked beautiful today, and that her dress was so extravagant that people might think she was the bride. Alina commented that today she wanted to let her sister stand out, since today was her day. But there were only 3 days left until the show, so Alina couldn't afford to look completely pale. When I was wounded by a golden arrow, I knew I would be his eternal captive, she sang. Ariana thought that Alina now liked the song. This is the part where the heroine of the courtesan's aria not only accepts forbidden love, but also swears to compensate for it. Ariana said that Alina really sings the song wonderfully, but her performance still needs some work. After all, the heroine had an affair with the husband of the one who considers her a sister. This should be played more vulgarly. Alina was indignant at that comment. Ariana said that the current facial expression would be perfect. Alina looks like an evil seductress. Alina didn't understand what Ariana was saying, nor why she was talking to her like that. The door creaked and Lucas's mother entered. The Marquise of Pettigrew came to see what was causing such a noise. Alina took her hand and invited her to sit down. The Marquise slapped her hand. She declared that such a rude and vulgar creature dared not touch her. The Marquise glanced at the blushing Alina. She said she would never have learned anything from her mother. Having a commoner mother had always been Alina's biggest weakness. Not to mention that Alina fears the Marquise of Pettigrew the most, a lady from a respected family. Alina bowed and said she would leave Madame Marquise immediately. She left, and the Marquise focused her attention on Ariana. She realized that the only thing that managed to decorate her was her face. Otherwise, the girl looked too boring for a bride. Moreover, she was so thin that it was unlikely she could have a child. Ariana remembered that, when she was Lucas's wife, the Marquise tormented her more than anyone else. But this time, she refused to remain silent. She said that if the seed is defective, nothing will grow in the most fertile soil. The Marquise claimed that the fact that her son was marrying someone from such a family was humiliating enough in itself. And she still had the audacity to insult Lucas in front of his mother. Ariana asked if the Marquis considered this wedding unfair. The Marquise replied that her family would never have mixed with someone like Lopez if it weren't for her innocent son. According to the Marquise, one couldn't even dream of a greater reward than this wedding. So Ariana was now obliged to serve her properly. Ariana objected that she saw no injustice in this union. Her grandfather was a renowned musician, and her mother was admired by many women for her noble character. The Marquise reminded them that this led to nothing after her grandfather's death. They were more dispossessed than any commoner. If Lucas hadn't invested in the opera, the Lopez family would never have been reborn. Ariana remembered that it was the Marquise who earned everything thanks to the profits from her performances. She heard that the Marquise had even previously resorted to loan sharks to satisfy her extravagant desires. Ariana assumed that this would further humiliate Lucas. The Marquise shouted that the insolent girl dared not speak to her in that tone, because she was just a peasant girl whom her family had deigned to treat. She wanted to hit Ariana, but the girl dodged her. The Marquise couldn't stay standing. She fell, and Ariana innocently asked if everything was okay with the lady. She said that since the Marquise needed to rest, she would leave her. Walking down the hallway, Ariana hoped the Marquise would have time to wake up before the start of the ceremony, because she wouldn't want her to miss all the most interesting things. My lady called the girl a man from the informant guild. He was surprised to see how incredible she looked, but right now, Ariana needed to follow him. He had just caught Lucas and Alina in the act. Ariana didn't understand what kind of crime they were talking about. It was hard to imagine them doing anything on their wedding day. And so they entered the correct rooms. Lucas comforted Alina as she cried. Alina complained that Ariana called her image vulgar. Alina complained to Lucas how Ariana mocked her dress, when all she wanted was to dress nicely for her sister's wedding. But Ariana felt nothing but hatred towards her. Lucas replied that his Eli simply had too tender a heart, but that she shouldn't worry so much, that he would reprimand Ariana severely, because she dared not say offensive things about her own sister. Alina pitifully said that Lucas was the only person she could trust. Lucas leaned towards his beloved and kissed her. His hands moved towards obvious liberties, making their way under Alina's dress. This scene could easily be seen if the dressing room doors were slightly ajar. Then Ariana closed the door. She was fed up with what she had seen. It was unbearable to keep watching. It seemed much more disgusting than one could imagine. Her companion reminded her that they had already gathered enough evidence, but he simply felt that she needed to see everything for herself. Ariana turned to him and thanked him for bringing her here. Now that I think about it, she should also be grateful to these two. For their behavior, she would not regret what she was about to do. With these thoughts, Ariana walked away and went out onto the stairs. Her brother blocked her way, eager to find out why she was so happy. Ariana said she was happy that her entire beloved family was together. Edward thought his sister was talking nonsense, but he had already had enough trouble. For example, with the Marquise who suddenly lost consciousness. He asked who had invited that person, and it seemed to him that this wedding was simply cursed. He said that since Ariana now belongs to the Pettigrew family, she should try to serve the Marquis well, because they need his power and influence very much. Ariana, said Lucas, also coming down the stairs, as if he had been looking for her for a long time. And he couldn't find her. He realized that she looked incredibly beautiful. Ariana noticed the lipstick on Lucas's face. He didn't even bother to wipe it off. She told Lucas that his lipstick was running. Lucas replied that it was because of the fruit he had eaten earlier. Ariana wondered if this man really loved Alina so much that he was willing to cheat on her, even on the day of his own wedding. He loves her so much that he is willing to risk being caught just to hold her in his arms. Come to think of it, in her past life, Ariana and Lucas almost never slept together, because Lucas's dignity rarely worked as it should. Sometimes, when they did this, he dragged Ariana to some corner of the garden where guests might pass by. There were also dark corridors where servants could pass at any moment, and no matter how much Ariana begged him to stop, he would just tell her to shut up. If you think about it, all these situations had one thing in common. There was always the possibility of being caught by surprise and being in a complicated situation. It was important for Lucas to do this in places where he could be seen or have an affair with his wife's sister. Ariana's ex-husband was simply so impotent that he couldn't get excited without a thrill. But one day, he finally succeeded. Ariana looked at Lucas and said it was quite fast. Lucas asked what his fiancé was talking about, which he had to finish quickly. Ariana thought she should tell him that she meant his ridiculous and pathetic outbursts of passion. The girl said out loud that the Lord perfectly understood what she was saying. But Lucas didn't understand. He was only worried about what Ariana might guess. Alina also came down to the hall radiant, sure that, just as she had planned, the Marquis belonged entirely to her. And only to her. Today was Ariana's wedding. But Lucas kept looking at Alina with such passion that it even gave him goosebumps. And suddenly, he saw a man he never expected to find at this event. At Lucas's wedding, Duke Hagenberg, an enemy of the emperor who supported his majesty, was present. Maybe he also came to see Alina. Of course he did, because he came to all her shows again and again. Perhaps last time, he rejected her invitation because something urgent came up. Alina approached the Duke and greeted him, and then she announced that she was the bride's younger sister. "Ah, so it's you," said the Duke indifferently. Alina smiled radiantly. He remembered her. She knew he had come there to see her. He was an intriguing, captivating, brave, and dangerous man. Today was the perfect opportunity for Alina to approach this man. The priest announced from his podium that they would now ask the groom to come out and greet him with applause. A satisfied Lucas appeared amid applause. Then it was the bride's turn to come out, and she was also greeted by all the guests. The eldest daughter of the Lopez house turned out to be much more beautiful than any of them expected. Alina angrily realized that everyone was looking at Ariana. That really annoyed her. She glanced at the Duke to assess his reaction. Dante looked sadly at his fiancée. Alina didn't understand why he was looking at her like that, as if she were about to explode at any moment. The priest asked the ritual question, whether Lucas Pettigrew swore to love his fiancée from now on. "And forever. I swear," said Lucas, looking straight ahead serenely. Then, the priest asked Ariana Lopez if she swore to love and honor her husband Lucas from now on. "And forever." And Ariana also answered in a confident voice. Only she said no. "Very well, then I proclaim it," said the priest. But he didn't finish the sentence, realizing what Ariana had just said. The guests began to make noise, discussing what Ariana had just said. It seemed the bride had said she disagreed. Lucas assumed his beloved Ari had just said something wrong, as she had been very nervous all day because of the wedding. But Ariana firmly assured that she was not mistaken. The priest asked if he could continue the ceremony. Lucas grabbed his fiancée by the elbow and told her that, of course, they were asking her to continue. The priest hesitantly said that if anyone was against this union, they could say so now, or remain silent forever. And to everyone's surprise, there was a man who wanted to intervene. It was the Duke, and he declared that he was against this union. Lucas looked over his shoulder, startled. Dante walked resolutely towards the couple. He told Ariana that he was afraid he couldn't hold back any longer. This statement stunned everyone present, because no one could understand exactly what was happening. Even the informant guild employee had no idea that his lordship was somehow involved in Lady Ariana's plan. The employee had previously asked the lady if she planned to publish the photos and cancel the wedding today. Ariana shook her head because she would cancel the wedding, but the photos would be useless. Ariana wanted Alina to sing the Temptress aria perfectly in front of everyone. Then she will need the photos. The song will cause a sensation when the audience guesses who it is about. What the employee couldn't understand was why his lordship was helping Madame Ariana to the detriment of his own reputation. Lucas asked Dante what that nonsense was, since Ariana was his fiancée. Dante announced that he had decided that a boy like Lucas did not deserve the hand of Ariana Lopez. He looked at the girl and said seriously that it was time to give him his answer. "Choose me instead of this conceited fool," he suggested, and assured her that he would value Ariana more than anyone else. "Ariana," Lucas shouted and asked if she could seriously think of something like that now. He was Lucas P. of Green, the man Ariana loved with all her heart. And Ariana replied that she had made a decision, which confused Lucas. She came to the conclusion that she could not marry him, which she said looking him in the eyes. Lucas asked, confused, if she meant that she was canceling the wedding. Just like that, in the middle of the ceremony. "Yes," said Ariana, "because I would rather die alone than marry someone like him." She called Lucas a disgusting bastard who was having an affair with his own sister. Lucas couldn't believe she knew that. He wanted to know since when. He cursed, because it turned out that out of all possible days, Ariana guessed what today was. Lucas exclaimed that it wasn't true, that he could explain everything. He took Ariana's hand and suggested they talk privately. But suddenly Dante struck Lucas, knocking him down. Dante told Lucas not to even dare to touch Ariana with his dirty paws. Then, said the Duke, looking at the girl, he wanted to know what choice she had made, and he assumed that she had chosen him. His hand went to Ariana's waist to pull her closer to him. He said that even if it wasn't so, he would get her out of there by any means necessary. Dante said he had decided everything the moment he first saw the girl. Ariana didn't understand if Dante's look was just a well-acted scene. The Duke leaned towards the girl and whispered that he had decided never to let her go again. With these words, he kissed Ariana in front of everyone present. The crew advanced along a narrow road. Alina sat inside, listening with an astonished look to the curses her companion was shouting. The brother cursed nonstop. He didn't understand how that pathetic girl dared to do this to them. Thanks to her, the alliance with the Pettigrew family was destroyed. The guests left the failed celebration in shock, and the Marquis of Pettigrew had to be carried out on a stretcher. And now the Marquis can withdraw the investment because he is furious. It was depressing. The premiere was only a couple of days away. It was not clear how it was that, of all possible people, Ariana had run away with Duke Heijenberg. And yet, she was still somewhere. It could be that Ariana somehow recovered the memory of what happened more than 10 years ago. Finally, the carriage stopped on the porch of the mansion. The brother got out and shouted at Alina to also get out of the carriage without delay. "It makes no sense," she replied. "No one like Ariana could become the Duke's bride." The opera was scheduled for 3 days from now. If this performance turned out to be a failure, they would not be able to participate in the founding festival. Alina looked absolutely terrible, as if she had no idea she would be singing on stage in just a couple of days. She asked her brother if he was serious about not going, despite the ongoing fiasco. But it was important to say that Ariana's presence or absence does not affect the performances of the Lopez Opera Theater in any way. And when Ariana returns, her brother will catch her and force her to marry the Marquis, even if he has to beat her almost to death. Ariana was at home and said, "Welcome home, dear brother," as if nothing had happened. "You," Alina and her brother shouted without finding the right words. Ariana smiled as she looked at them. The brother shouted that Ariana was a pathetic girl who didn't understand what she had done today. He asked how she dared to show up at home with that insolent smile after such a scandal. Ariana replied that this was the reason why she was packing her things. She intended to leave that house forever. She saw no reason for surprise, because after getting married, she would no longer be able to live in that house. The brother asked her if she really meant that she wanted to marry the Duke. She didn't dare to say that, so he lunged and hit her. This little brute simply didn't dare to say such things. He didn't dare to act like this. Ariana used to get very scared when Edward got angry like this. It made the girl feel as if her drunk father had suddenly come back to life. But now, Ariana could clearly see that he looked completely ridiculous. Seeing his sister's smile, Edward frowned. He raised his hand to slap her and demanded that she immediately remove that insolent smile from her face. But Ariana did not stand idly by and kicked her brother in the shin. Edward fell with a groan, clutching his leg at the cries of a frightened Alina. As Ariana watched, remembering her grandfather's words, which he often repeated during her childhood, the older man always taught her to aim for the shin when hitting, not the groin, even when dealing with men. In the end, it turned out he was right. Ariana told her brother that she was not going to marry Lucas, while he was still shouting at her for hitting him and being rude. The girl asked if Edward hadn't been curious to know why she had decided to cancel the wedding so abruptly. The man, who had gotten up from the floor and was very irritated, indignantly agreed to listen to his sister. Ariana revealed that Lucas cheated on her. She added that this happened on the very day of their wedding. When Alina heard those words, her eye twitched, and Ariana finished her story with none other than her own sister. Alina exclaimed that Ariana had simply gone completely crazy. Alina shouted that Ariana thought she was having an affair with her son-in-law, but she didn't dare accuse her of such indecency. It was only at that moment that Edward found out that Lucas had been having an affair with Alina. He couldn't say he didn't expect this from them. He saw how this stupid girl tried to flirt with her sister's fiancé several times, and it was obvious that Lucas enjoyed her attention. Now Alina shouted angrily that her sister dared not try to ruin her reputation in that way, portraying her as a woman of easy virtue. She ran to her brother and asked him to defend her. According to Alina, Ariana was setting her up to cover up what she had done, and Edward said he understood everything. The sound of the impact was very loud. Alina backed away from him. "Come to think of it, I don't remember ever hitting you," Edward said to Alina. The girl trembled with fear as she looked at her brother. Edward demanded that she apologize to her sister this very second, which angered Alina, because she believed she had nothing to apologize for. She was not guilty of anything. Ariana saw this familiar scene and thought that the slap was a big surprise for Alina. And this was natural, considering that neither her father nor Edward had hit her before, because Ariana always defended her sister and took the full brunt of the punishment upon herself. Although she strongly doubted that Alina had ever thought about it, now Alina was indignant that Edward could say something like that to her. Edward hit her again, angry at her behavior. He ordered her to immediately kneel down and apologize to Ariana. Alina couldn't believe that Edward demanded that of her. Edward replied that if his sister was accusing Alina of something like that, she could at least pretend to repent and not be insolent in response. Alina apologized with a laugh, but Edward wasn't looking at her, but at Ariana. He understood that since Ariana had discovered her sister with Lucas, that was a good reason to leave. And now he needed to calm the indignant girl. Edward thought that Ariana had always been a softie, so now he just needed to make Alina apologize, even on her knees. "Thanks for this cheap farce," said Ariana. With a smile, she announced to her brother and sister that, unfortunately, their audience was coming to an end. Paying no further attention to her surprised relatives, the girl headed for the exit to close the door behind her forever. Late, Edward ran after her, calling her by name. He was surprised to see a hand with a sword blocking his way. "Who the hell are you?" Edward asked the man who had blocked his way. The stranger replied that he had orders from his lordship to protect Lady Ariana from anyone who wanted to harm her. Meanwhile, Ariana went to a completely different mansion, shining in the twilight. The door creaked and Ariana entered, thinking that this was the Duke's residence. She was told that he would be there himself, but the girl couldn't find him anywhere. Suddenly, Ariana's attention was drawn by a sudden sound. It was the Duke who appeared before the girl. Ariana thought she had never seen him in simple clothes before, so he looked a little strange to her. Dante's gaze fell on Ariana's face. "What happened to you?" he asked, and the girl didn't immediately understand what he was referring to. He took her chin in his hand to get a closer look at the slap mark from Edward. Ariana hadn't thought it was so noticeable. Dante affirmed that he despised any harm to his property, especially when it came to his woman. Ariana asked with embarrassment if the Duke was worried about her, but decided that he was not. Most likely, it could only affect his reputation in some way. Ariana quickly apologized and assured the Duke that it would not happen again. Dante looked at her and said that didn't answer the question he asked. Dante said he doubted it was Ariana's sister. He suspected it was her brother. Dante recalled that his name was Edward Lopez. Now he was going to make him pay somehow. Ariana felt a cold sweat run down her skin from the Duke's intense gaze, and her voice broke as she tried to explain that she had kicked the attacker in the shin. Dante smiled openly. He asked her if that blow had satisfied Ariana's thirst for revenge, but the girl replied that it was only the beginning. However, she had to admit that the Duke had made the day much better, and she thanked him with a smile. Dante replied that he was glad she liked it. He touched her face and told her that it was nice to know that she was giving him pleasure. Ariana didn't understand why Dante was caressing her lips. She remembered that kiss and immediately blushed. She forced herself to sort out her thoughts because she knew that all of this was just a game. Still stammering, she expressed her confidence that the last part would make everyone talk about today's events. Then Ariana bowed and added that she would do her best to repay her debt as soon as possible. Dante noticed that she really had a lot to repay him for, and Ariana was surprised that he said so much. The Duke replied that he thought so, that the girl was not pretending, but had actually forgotten too much. And Ariana didn't understand at all what his lordship was talking about. What exactly could she have forgotten? "All right," said Dante. "I will give you the opportunity to find out for yourself and try to remember it." Ariana enthusiastically reviewed her memories. She might have been talking about that old incident, but it couldn't have been related to his lordship. There was something she was missing. In recent days, high society was rife with gossip and news. The ladies, while having tea, they told each other the details of what happened the day before at the unfortunate wedding. It was simply an incredible spectacle, and the Marquise Pettigrew, who fainted and hid herself, she is now forced to wear a cast. Few could imagine that his lordship would ruin the wedding and take the bride away with him. But the biggest mystery was how this girl managed to conquer his unapproachable heart. This is exactly what was being discussed in the mansions and halls of the capital. Everyone wondered what would happen to Her Highness now that she would also learn the news. The fact that Duke Dante Heijenberg disturbed the wedding to take the bride away himself. It has even been published in newspapers. Everyone asked if this was the woman he chose instead of Princess Katarina. Katarina read the article and remembered the name, Ariana Lopez. The princess was going to see this girl in person. A loud laugh echoed through the Lopez residence. Edward asked Wilhelm if he was sure that the ledger he held in his hands was correct. Edward jumped up and exclaimed that it was wonderful that all seats were sold out the second and third day. Moreover, there were already rumors about ticket resales. This was a blessing in disguise, and thinking about it delighted Edward. The obscene scene that Devil had suddenly created turned out to be advantageous for them. Edward asked Wilhelm what the total amount was, and the figure was 10 million catons. The Lopez family did not have that much money. Even when Edward's father was the head of the estate, Edward told his assistant to contact the best tailors and order them to bring catalogs. Since he was rich now, he could afford to buy a couple of expensive suits. Wilhelm looked at Edward with a strange expression on his face. At that very moment, Ariana received a letter. She learned that Edward had already ordered costumes to celebrate the sold-out show. Ariana read with laughter about the unparalleled success of the Lopez Opera House. Her brother must have been on cloud 9. Ariana hoped that he would fly higher than any cloud of jubilation, and then his fall would bring her only greater pleasure. Now the girl had other plans. Ariana thought it was time to meet her allies. To begin with, she thanked these people for coming to her invitation. She apologized for not being able to pay more attention to the orchestra recently, and expressed her hope that rehearsals would go well. But the interlocutors believed that Ariana had no reason to apologize, because everyone knew how busy she was. Ariana didn't need to worry. Everything planned was going to go off like clockwork. If we think about it, these three guests today were the stars of the Lopez Opera Orchestra. Louis was great, tall, handsome, and undeniably charismatic. Ruben was always angelically sweet, and Lorelei was especially popular with women. She was distinguished by her special charm and friendly manner. The level of attractiveness in this room was simply extraordinary, blinding Ariana. But the girl firmly composed herself, because as she had changed the future of these people, she had to do her best for them. She had to justify their faith in her. Suddenly, a man ran into the room with a message for Madame Ariana. Her Highness the Princess's carriage has arrived. The Duke was not at home, and therefore, Ariana had to decide what to do in such a situation. Everyone was surprised that the princess was here somehow. Ariana thought that Her Highness had arrived even earlier than expected, because everyone knew that Dante was the princess's first love. She said that Her Highness must be here to see her, and ordered that the princess be escorted to the hall for honored guests. Then she turned to a worried Reuben. She asked him to perform a song for them. The idea of performing in front of the princess scared the musician, but everything happened as Ariana had planned. And soon beautiful music filled the bright hall. Reuben played the violin for two ladies sitting at a tea table. The princess stated that although Ariana was a guest like her, she apparently already imagined herself as the owner of this property. Ariana replied that she understood that her position was an undeserved honor for her, but the Duke allowed her to act in his name during his absence. The princess thought it was ridiculous. One might assume that they had already exchanged marriage vows. Ariana didn't know what to answer her. The princess thought sadly that the engagement had apparently really taken place, and that the Duke was truly close to this girl. Recently, an article was published about what happened in Elysium. The man the princess personally hired to watch the Duke was hit by him before he could find out anything. The fact that they got engaged so quickly still seemed like complete nonsense, and the princess refused to accept it. Ariana said she knew she didn't have much merit compared to Her Highness, and that someone more refined would be suitable for the role of the owner of this property. Someone like Your Highness. The princess didn't understand what her interlocutor had in mind. Why did she suddenly launch into such flattering speeches? But she was completely right. Ariana began to talk about the delicate pattern that adorned the princess's dress. Her Highness didn't allow her to change the subject so abruptly. Ariana replied that she just wanted to say that the design was very beautiful and delicate, but she thought it would be impertinent of her to praise Her Highness's dress. The princess suddenly opened her fan and covered her face with it, but Ariana had no intention of offending her in any way. The princess thought about her interlocutor. What was wrong with her? Why did she have such impeccable taste? Now the princess saw that, contrary to all the spicy rumors about this girl, Ariana's face looked like that of a virtuous maiden from an honorable family. She was so beautiful. The princess said that Ariana had a good eye because she herself drew the pattern of this dress. So it is impossible to order a similar one from any tailor. So this is your work, exclaimed Ariana. And it was no wonder then that the style seemed so familiar to her. The princess was surprised that this almost stranger knew something about her personal drawing style. Ariana happily explained that she even had one of the princess's art brochures. The art brochures could only be works that the princess had created at the End Royal Academy of Art. Her Highness became terribly agitated, the reasons for which were incomprehensible to Ariana. She coldly ordered her interlocutor to get rid of those brochures this very instant. This greatly surprised Ariana, and she asked why she had to do that. The enraged princess shouted that she had made those works many years ago, that there were so many mistakes that she couldn't even look at them. Ariana replied that perhaps for the princess herself this was true, but for her those paintings were the only solace, especially the one showing a girl holding a dandelion fluff. The way the girl couldn't let go of or squeeze what was slipping from her hands. It comforted Ariana when she felt lonely, something she could never have. Ariana admitted that it might sound strange, but she felt as if that painting understood and shared her sadness. She looked at the princess with a smile. The empty sadness that arises from wanting what one cannot have was exactly what Her Highness was thinking when she painted this picture. Never before had anyone shown such deep knowledge of the princess's work. Princess Katarina told herself that she must sort out her thoughts. All this must have been some kind of plan. She couldn't forget why she had come here. The princess admitted that Ariana had a very sharp and penetrating gaze, but she was mistaken in believing that such cheap flattery would be capable of convincing her and winning her favor. Katarina said she refuses to stand aside and watch Ariana drag Dante into indecent scandals. She knew it was futile, that the chance of marrying Dante had never existed. He already has enormous power, and if he also becomes the heir to the throne, the political balance of this empire will sink into chaos. At that moment, the princess focused her attention on the music. She commented out loud that the melody had been playing for some time, and Ariana suggested telling the violinist to stop if Her Highness didn't like it. Katarina replied that she didn't mean that, she just wanted to know where the melody came from. To tell the truth, said Ariana, this piece is inspired by a painting that Your Highness exhibited at the last Foundation Festival. It was called Two-Faced Joy, and the song was created to represent the melancholy of the princess's painting. Katarina didn't understand at all what was happening, how this girl could also comprehend her art. The princess asked how Ariana heard that song. Ariana replied that she wrote it, which surprised Katarina, who simply couldn't believe that a woman wrote the melody. Ariana said it was true, just as it was true that a princess, also a woman, painted that picture. Katarina supposed that Ariana had deliberately ordered that nice violinist to play that piece, after learning that the princess had arrived. Now everything was clear to her. This girl planned everything from the beginning to gain Katarina's trust. Angrily, the princess said she would come back another time. She said goodbye and left, leaving Ariana bewildered. Ariana thought that the rumors that the princess was fond of flattery were true. Now for a while she would not oppose her plans. But Ariana hadn't lied at all when she confessed her love for Her Highness's paintings. And it was also true that she had written the melody, inspired by the two-faced joy. Ariana sincerely hoped that the princess would see her sincerity. After a couple of days, many people formed a long queue. Elena walked in front of these people with a triumphant smile. The people from the audience greeted Madame Elena. They said she was as beautiful as ever and that they looked forward to her performance. Elena thought with satisfaction that what happened at the wedding only helped the Lopez family attract unprecedented attention. All shows were sold out. It was strange that once Ariana disappeared, things started to get much better. It even seemed that the sister was the cause of all previous failures. Elena simply couldn't understand why Mr. Lucas kept insisting on looking for Ariana when it was completely obvious that they were doing well without her. Elena was sure that after the colossal success of today's performance, even Mr. Lucas would finally understand who the real treasure of the Lopez opera was. And then it would be her who would become the next Marquise of Pettigrew. With this in mind, Elena entered the opera house. But her mood was not destined to remain serene there. Edward was furious because there was no one from the orchestra there, and he didn't understand where they could be. Elena asked what it meant that the orchestra was missing, since the performance was about to begin. Edward replied irritably that he had said exactly what he meant. None of the musicians had shown up. Elena exclaimed that these people simply couldn't be late on such an important day. She stated that it was Edward's responsibility to make sure they were there, even if it meant dragging them out of their homes. But Edward had already checked their homes and couldn't find them anywhere, as if they had all decided to disappear at once. And then Elena asked if they couldn't hire someone else. Edward shouted at his sister, calling her by name, because no musician on earth could learn such a complex piece in such a short time. The man who had joined the Lopez siblings asked if Edward meant that the program would have to be canceled. It was Lucas Pettigrew, and Edward quickly assured him that the Marquis didn't need to worry, because he had already found a pianist, and they would manage without him. Edward grabbed his sister by the wrist and roughly pulled her towards him, causing her to cry out in pain. And surprise, Edward told Elena to go buy them some time. "What are you saying?" exclaimed Elena. She didn't understand what she was supposed to do on stage without a single accompanist, but Edward shouted in her face that she could do whatever she wanted, sing songs, or juggle. He didn't care what she came up with. "Listen, Elena Lopez," said Edward. He put a lot of money into this opera house, and now he simply couldn't lose it all because of someone's stupid mistake. If this happens, Edward could get very angry. "Okay," said Elena with a tremor. She walked onto the empty stage, surrounded by whispers from the audience. When Elena started singing, people started asking where the orchestra was, why the soprano was singing alone on stage. Maybe it was some new move. Elena continued to sing the aria without musical accompaniment. "From the moment I saw you," she sang the verses of a song. But the audience said the singer had a good voice, but everything sounded boring, without accompaniment. They hadn't paid that much money to listen to a soprano singing a cappella. Elena convinced herself that she was a professional and would be able to cope with such circumstances. She simply had to do it, because if she failed now, it was scary to imagine what Edward would do. Elena continued the aria, but felt a shiver down her spine. At that moment, Elena noticed that in the first row there was a man. It was Ariana, who was sitting smiling and looking at the stage. Elena didn't understand what her sister was doing there. The audience noticed a change in Elena's singing. They assumed she was singing out of tune, and then the singer stopped singing altogether. Elena thought angrily that Ariana had come here on purpose because she wanted to provoke her. That could be the only reason the sister was here. Elena thought it wouldn't be easy, because Ariana's mere presence wasn't enough to make her lose her temper. Because unfortunately for Ariana, Elena was no amateur, and she showed everyone who they were dealing with. No matter how wicked those feelings were, Elena sang, "I will sell my honor, I will lose my morality, the words of the aria said. No, Ariana can never displace her. Elena was the sole owner of this brilliant stage. Elena was born to shine in the opera, but at that very moment she saw something much more disturbing. These were photographs that captured her and Lucas in their most indecent moments. It turned out that Ariana knew everything from the beginning. She had been watching Elena and Lucas long before their unfortunate wedding. Hidden behind a mask of calm, Ariana simply waited for the right moment to strike. What's wrong? Ariana asked, looking at her sister, and ordered her to continue singing. This is still your aria, said Ariana. But this was the courtesan's aria, which Ariana once sang with such enthusiasm. At that moment, Elena didn't know why Ariana had such a triumphant smile. Elena realized that Ariana had written this song to mock her sister. And now that made her furious. After this episode, people started leaving. They said they had thrown their money in the trash, and all after talking about how this performance would go down in history. After all, the audience had paid a fortune not to see Elena alone, but to enjoy sophisticated music. Now some of them were going to demand a refund, because the organizers couldn't believe that all those funds had been thrown away on a third-rate opera. When one of the spectators said this out loud, the others completely agreed with him. It was unacceptable that such a wonderful evening had been irreparably ruined. So said the man, who then pointed towards the fountain and commented that he had heard someone was holding a high-level show in the Place de la Madeleine, and absolutely free. He quickly walked there himself and suggested that the rest of the disappointed spectators do the same. Place de la Madeleine, the man in the top hat asked his neighbor and suggested they go there too. Ariana hurried to the Place de la Madeleine, hoping very much not to be late. The place she was in such a hurry to get to was already very crowded and noisy. Everyone was surprised that there was a whole orchestra in the square. It was not clear what it was doing there. The young pink-haired singer stepped forward. She was terribly nervous, not knowing if she could handle it. Rosaline. A familiar voice sounded very close, and the girl looked up. She saw Ariana, her lady, and smiled. Ariana smiled and told Rosalind to do it as she did in rehearsal. They had a month to prepare. It wasn't enough in any way, but Ariana could confidently say that everyone did their best every day. The time and effort invested were not in vain. The orchestra conductor looked at Ariana and nodded. The show was about to begin. The violins began to sound here. The melody flowed, bewitching the audience. The music was so beautiful that some of the female spectators could not contain their cries of admiration. From the moment I saw you, Rosaline began to sing in the meantime. I knew you would ignite a forbidden desire in me, as the aria said. The audience was surprised who this singer was, with such an exquisite voice, for they had never heard her sing before. Ariana thought that Rosaline was doing very well, but recently, this girl said she wanted to be better than Lady Elena. Although that might sound immodest, Rosalind thought there must be a reason why Ariana offered her patronage, especially since the Lopez opera had a magnificent soprano, Elena. Rosalind didn't know all the details, but she had a theory. Maybe Lady Ariana was trying to get back all the songs her family had stolen. Songs like Empower. So, Rosalind intended to dedicate herself completely to this performance. She wanted to reward Ariana for giving her a chance. Hidden from prying eyes, I will charm you with my charm, Rosalind sang now. After all, the forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. The audience was delighted with the beautiful and very powerful voice of the singer. But they were a little confused by the text of the aria. Even when my friend is by my side, her husband still catches my eye. The risk of being discovered only increases the restlessness, the song said. The audience understood that the heroine was saying she was going to seduce her friend's husband. All we need is not to get caught. Our lies are as innocent as the first snowfall, sang Rosaline. One of the spectators was indignant at such words. Could the lie really be innocent? And cheaters always think they are not doing anything wrong. Make love to me, baby, Rosalind shouted, extending her hand to the sky. She sang about the adultery that took place in the garden, in the mansion hallway, and even in the cheater's dressing room. It seemed very vulgar to the spectators to choose not only the garden, but also the dressing room of a deceived bride as a place for their rendezvous, as if they were animals who couldn't restrain their impulses of passion. But the song claimed that this love was too sweet to be a crime. But even if there was one, she would gladly receive a life sentence, sang Rosalind enthusiastically. Edward and Lucas also arrived at the square. They saw with their own eyes why all their spectators came here. It was a dirty trick by Ariana. The insolent scoundrel, Lucas was also furious, because the song clearly talked about him and Alina. After finishing the aria, Rosalind thanked the audience for coming to enjoy her performance, and then proceeded to introduce her composer. Ariana's heels clicked as she approached the performers. Rosalind named Lady Ariana Lopez. Lucas thought Ariana would still pay for everything. Ariana bowed to the audience and thanked everyone for their attention. But everyone knew this lady. They saw her picture in the newspaper. It was Ariana Lopez, the runaway bride of Amazon. Everyone was surprised that it was she who wrote the song they had just heard. And this lady was so young that it was hard to believe in her skill. Ariana Lopez. Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. It was Edward who finally addressed the first row of the audience. He ran to his sister to ask how she dared to steal his stage. But Ariana only replied that it was a surprise for her to see Edward, Mr. Pettigrew. Here, it would be more correct to say return, not steal. She observed, looking her brother in the eye. "What's it a liar?" Edward shouted, waving his hand at her. Edward was furious, believing that he was the author of that song. People kept whispering. They didn't understand what kind of return they could be talking about. What was this girl talking about? Edward felt a chill run down his spine from all those whispers. But Lucas pushed him aside and tried to get closer to Ariana. When he reached her, he grabbed the girl by the shoulders and shouted, asking her where the hell she was. He wanted to know how he could be ignored after Ariana had humiliated him so much. But Ariana replied that she believed he had no right to judge her. "No right, huh?" Lucas replied, because he believed that she never had the right to insult him like that. He shouted in her face that it was Ariana who had the affair, not him. And he demanded that she tell the truth about the first time she cheated on him with the Duke. Ariana commented that it was very funny that, in reality, he was accusing her of something he himself had done. Lucas believed the girl was pretending after what she did in front of everyone. Lucas thought Ariana was using him as an excuse not to let him have fun with her, and then handed her body over to the Duke. Now it was necessary to make her pay for it. Lucas leaned towards Ariana and told her that he feared her life as a noble had ended, because nothing ruined a girl's reputation more than betrayal. He was wrong to think that Lucas would not notice that she was trying to humiliate him again. But the pathetic lyrics of the song are not enough to inflict the harm she deserves. Lucas loudly declared that Ariana was the one who betrayed him by having a dirty affair with the Duke, and Alina was only comforting him in his despair. All the spectators heard the Marquis's accusations, who asked how Ariana could turn everything into vulgar indecency. Lucas said he told her over and over again to be less paranoid. He claimed that he always knew that Ariana would get angry if he looked at another woman, but he never thought her jealousy would go beyond all limits. Lucas thought that as soon as Ariana found out about his relationship with Alina, she would visit her personal doctor to request a certificate stating that the girl suffered from paranoia and delusional jealousy. The Pettigrew estate may no longer be what it was, but it can still bring a low-ranking noblewoman to her knees. Ariana will regret having dared to cross his path. With feigned concern, he announced to everyone that he should have paid more attention to the treatment of his delusion, since he was so worried about the state of his dear fiancé. Ariana smiled and said that perhaps the story about paranoia and delusional jealousy was the best counterattack Lucas could come up with. Lucas didn't understand why the girl was smiling like that. Ariana apologized to a sad Lucas, but he was more pathetic than she imagined. She explained with a smile that she simply meant that she would not have acted with such confidence if he had paid a gambling doctor for a certificate. Ariana said she really doubted he would have spent his meager fortune on such a fruitless endeavor. To the spectators, the news that the Marquis had bribed the doctor to make the lady seem paranoid was surprising. Now they were talking about how the lady seemed as sane as the rest of them. Lucas shouted that none of that changed the fact that Ariana had entered into an inappropriate relationship with the Duke. He couldn't deny it because she was the one who ran off holding his hand. Ariana replied that she noticed Alina wasn't there, and then she could assume that the Marquis simply didn't hear what she heard. She was talking about the photographs she showed Alina during her performance. Now she will show the photographs to the Marquis, throwing them in his face. Everyone will be able to see this proof that she was right. Ariana recalled the law concerning divorce. If an event occurs that merits the dissolution of the union, the victim has the right to divorce regardless of the couple's consent. However, no responsibility is assumed for actions that occurred after the incident. Ariana threw the entire stack of photographs at Lucas's chest. She said that all this meant that from the moment her fiancé cheated on her with her sister, she had the right to be with whomever she wanted. Lucas looked at those photographs trembling, trying to understand how they were taken. He asked how long ago Ariana knew all that. The people nearby gathered the scattered photographs. They saw in them direct evidence that everything the lady said was true. It turned out that the lyrics of that aria were based on a real story. Lucas looked at Ariana's face and said she was an evil woman. Now it was no wonder that she made him sick. She always pretended to be sweet and innocent, but in reality all this time she was plotting to destroy him. Innocence was Ariana's only redeeming quality, but now she destroyed it with her own hands. Lucas believed that the Duke would quickly get tired of Ariana because she was just a boring toy, and ugly to him, completely unworthy of love. He asked how Ariana managed to seduce the Duke in the first place, unless she offered him her body. But none of that would matter. Ever, at that moment, a man approached them and grabbed Lucas. It was Duke Hagenberg, who said he had no idea that he and Lucas had become so close as to dare to forget formalities. Lucas was trembling and didn't know what to say to his lord. Clutching his hand tightly, Dante declared that those who seek his attention must remember that the closer a person is to him, the less delicate he is with them. But since he and Lucas had become so close, Dante felt he had the right to give him advice, and pointed out that there was nothing more pathetic than a man obsessed with a woman who had abandoned him. The Duke ordered him to stop bothering his fiancée. He threw Lucas away from him forcefully. When Lucas started coughing, Dante told him to get out of his sight. Then he put his arm around Ariana's shoulders and invited her to leave together. They walked away, followed by the gaze of the crowd. Soon the Duke's carriage was taking them away from the square. Dante said that first Ariana received a slap. Then she stood there and let that bastard insult her. Dante reminded her that he had already said that even if Ariana saw their relationship as just a contract, she was still his future duchess. By allowing herself to be humiliated, Ariana was also humiliating the Duke. Ariana looked at Dante and replied that she was apologizing. She fell silent when Lucas said those words, because she was only thinking about how to turn his words against him. The girl thanked the Duke for his help today. Dante replied that she didn't need to thank him. He had already told her to use everything she had, because that way she wouldn't have regrets when he did the same thing to Ariana herself. Ariana replied that she hadn't done anything that her interlocutor could consider useful. "Don't worry," the Duke whispered, leaning towards the girl's ear. He reminded her that she would do enough for him when they got married. This left Ariana extremely confused. It was possible that Dante meant exactly what she thought, but for him, it was impossible. "Lopez," said Dante, looking into her eyes. He noticed with a smile that the girl had turned completely red. The Duke said he understood that, as an actress, Ariana had a very active imagination, but he suggested that they try to control it. Ariana replied indignantly that this was not what she meant at all. The next day was clear, and the birds sang loudly near the mansion. Ariana couldn't wait to see what they had written yesterday and rushed to open the newspaper. In the newspaper, there was an article about the Marquis of Pettigrew being discovered in an illicit affair with the soprano Alina Lopez. It turned out that the Marquis was having an affair with the younger sister of his own fiancé. After Ariana revealed Lucas's affair yesterday, she sent a small gift to the 3 most popular newspapers in this country. Among others, there were images in which the faces of Lucas were especially clearly visible. And Alina, now she smiled, because the articles had turned out even better than she originally expected, with eye-catching headlines and convincing evidence. Suddenly, something else caught the girl's attention. This newspaper was called the Morning Empire. It was the most prestigious publication in the entire country, and they usually didn't stoop to gossip. However, they wrote the article without conducting any separate investigation. Today's entire issue of the Morning Empire was sold out. The servant informed the Duke that thanks to him, this was all everyone was talking about. But still, the assistant really wanted to ask his lordship a question that had been bothering him lately. First, the Duke stole the bride from the altar, and then suddenly she asked her assistant to write an article for him. But in any case, his lordship's order was fulfilled, and the special edition of the newspaper was completed. And as for the influence, this was quite obvious. Dante commented that it was a wonderful wedding gift. The assistant said with surprise that he didn't think the Duke seriously planned to marry. But Dante calmly replied that of course he would. Otherwise, it would make no sense to go so far and steal the bride in front of everyone. These words greatly surprised the assistant. It would have been really the same Dante Heijenberg who was now sitting in front of him. Who had uttered those words? The newspaper reported a shocking twist, that the lyrics of the courtesan's aria were based on the story of its composer Ariana Lopez. The attached photos were really terrifying. They showed everything in detail. No one in society could have imagined that the Marquis of Pettigrew was capable of such a thing. For he seemed so decent, and moreover, with a soprano who had recently become very popular. Everyone has read that the courtesan's aria was a real story, about two people who gave themselves over to criminal passion in the garden, in the hallway, in the dressing room of a deceived friend. It was incredibly obscene. The bell above the door rang melodiously. On the threshold appeared the one who had been the heroine of the most popular gossip of recent days. Elena Lopez fixed her hair and greeted those present, but all the ladies ostentatiously moved away from her. Elena didn't understand how they dared to ignore her so brazenly. She approached Mrs. Olivia and loudly praised the lace on her dress. But Olivia protected herself with an open fan and said that it was too rude to address her so casually, since they were not friends at all. Then she turned her back on Elena, and Elena thought that this insolent girl had literally begged her to visit her salon a week ago. No one spoke about Elena in person, but everyone discussed her among themselves, not only as a famous and admirable singer, but as the one who had an affair with her own sister's fiancé, about whom there were lines of lies. Innocent as the first snow, the ladies couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. Elena tried to convince herself to remain calm in the face of these temporary difficulties. But it's not for nothing they say that every true star is always accompanied by a couple of scandals. Suddenly someone called Elena, and she thought people were still seeking her attention. Yes, Elena replied quickly and asked what they wanted from her. The modestly dressed girl said she worked for a tailor in a nearby district. They still hadn't received payment for Elena's last dress. Elena blushed and replied that the payment would certainly be made and that her brother would take care of the matter in the very near future. The girl said that her manager demanded full payment before the weekend, but Elena answered her brusquely that she had already said she would pay. She left with a slam of the door, and the ladies began to whisper again, looking at her. Elena ran down the street with terrible irritation. Passers-by stared at her, which only increased her anger. She didn't understand what everyone was looking at. The fact that these people perceived her as a laughingstock drove her crazy. Suddenly, someone grabbed Elena by the hand. The girl gasped and stepped back. The stranger tried to hold her, and when the hood revealed his face, Elena recognized Lucas. She shouted at him that now she should hide at home from prying eyes and not parade in the streets. Elena replied that she wanted to explain herself to the people and restore her reputation. But Lucas was sure that there was nothing to explain everything. It had already been described in newspaper articles. "Listen to me, Elena," he said. He believed there was a way out of this. These words encouraged the girl. Lucas explained that there was one newspaper with which he had a good relationship. Lucas can arrange a meeting with her reporter and Elena, and then she will have to make a confession. She will have to say that she herself bothered the Marquis. After all, the only evidence is a photo of their kiss. Elena will have to tell the reporter that she kissed him out of desperation due to unrequited passionate love. The girl objected that then her reputation would be completely ruined. She said she had a better idea. They should face the gossip head-on. When Lucas didn't understand what Elena meant, she replied that they could get married. She can confidently promise the Marquis that she will be a better wife for him than Ariana ever could be. Lucas just laughed in response to these speeches. He observed with a smile that Elena was just an ordinary commoner. He never intended to marry someone of that background. Lucas reminded Elena of circumstances she seemed to have forgot, because even though Edward and Arian's mother was the daughter of an earl, Elena's mother was just a commoner. There was no way a nobleman could marry a woman of low birth. Elena asked if it was normal for a nobleman to sleep with a woman of low birth. "Oh, Elena," Lucas sighed, leaning towards the girl to whisper in her ear that everyone should be aware of their situation and stay where they belong. Elena repeated these words about position and where she should stay to herself. It was the only way that would allow them to survive together. The mansion was also discussing the recent news that Lady Elena's tailor had asked her to hurry up and pay the bill in front of everyone, and she had to leave the hall hastily, and Ariana's maid said that Elena deserved it. Ariana thought that everything was exactly as she expected. Her brother and sister were probably already heavily indebted for the amount of money they had to repay for the opera. The maid heard that a red-haired man dragged Alina into an alley. Most likely it was Lucas Pettigrew. She was very interested in what they could be talking about. A nobleman of high birth had gotten involved in a dirty scandal with a woman of lower status. And given how much Lucas cared about his reputation, it was obvious to Ariane that he would say such a thing. But the Alina that Ariane knew was much more unscrupulous and ambitious than Lucas could have ever imagined. Ariane handed a letter to the maid Sophie and told her to deliver it to Wilhelm when he returned to the Lopez mansion. And when the maid reminded the lady that she also needed to change the dress she was wearing, Ariana replied that she was going to meet his lordship. Sophie blushed and exclaimed that she couldn't even imagine that the lady had such important things to do today. With unexpected enthusiasm, the maid said that her lady didn't need to worry about anything, and that she could trust her completely. The sun was already setting, evening was approaching. Ariana went to the Duke's private office. She asked permission to enter, and then she appeared before his lordship in a renewed image by Sophie's efforts. Dante looked at her thoughtfully. It seemed that Sophie had overdone it a bit in decorating her lady, but there was no way to stop the excited maid. Ariana said she wanted to give something to Dante. She opened the piano lid. Observing the Duke lately, Ariana noticed that he always looked very tired. Since he worked late into the night, Dante always dozed off when they traveled in the carriage, so Ariana had an idea. This was the first song that Ariana wrote. In the past, when she was still a little girl, once, on a picnic, she suggested to her mother that she should lie down too. Just as she did, she invented a lullaby for her, hoping her mother would have pleasant dreams. Grandfather praised her and said he thought a genius composer had appeared in their family. This is the melody Ariana decided to play for Dante now. Although she didn't know if it would help him in any way, Dante got up from under the table and walked towards Ariana. He stopped her performance, took her hand, and told her she had talent. Then he added that it was fascinating, and Ariana's heart started beating faster. She hoped that Dante meant the melody. To his influence, Ariana decided to ask about the article that appeared in the Morning Empire. She needed to know if it was his lordship's work. The Duke asked her why she thought so, and Ariana explained that she saw no other reason for such a conservative newspaper to publish such news so quickly. Ariana knew that melodies didn't mean much, but to her regret, there was nothing else she could do for him at the moment. The girl had heard that a relaxing music, like the one she had just put on, helped him fall asleep. And, if his lordship liked it, she could write down the notes for him immediately. No, said Dante thoughtfully. And then he added that he would prefer her to play for him whenever he wanted. Dante affirmed that he could call Ariana on those nights when he suffered from insomnia. He leaned even closer to her neck and asked if Ariana was wearing perfume. Sophie just told her mistress today that she heard that scented hair accessories are in fashion now. Ariana realized that the maid had put her new knowledge into practice right now. When she was doing her hair, she asked Dante if it mattered if she wore perfume. Dante asked her if she knew what that smell was, but Ariana wasn't entirely sure. The Duke informed her that it was a cyclamen, also known as alpine violet. Ariana thought that cyclamen grew in cold regions, and perhaps the Duke's estate was where it grew. Dante explained that in the language of aromas, cyclamen meant an invitation to follow the one who wears it. It was also an invitation to go to his bedroom. Ariana thought that Sophie probably hadn't chosen the poems for that purpose. She wasn't that calculating. The problem was Dante, who for some reason decided to focus on such insignificant details. No, maybe it was because Ariana was always confused. She apologized to his lordship. Understanding the language of flowers was a vital part of an aristocrat's education. She recognized Ariana and now apologized for her ignorance. Dante chuckled. He couldn't even imagine that someone could admit ignorance with such elegant style. The Duke noticed that Ariana's planned revenge lately was apparently going well, thanks to which he was also having fun, but he didn't forget to remind the girl that she still hadn't paid for all the services he had rendered her. Ariana immediately agreed and assured him that she would try to fulfill the role of his wife conscientiously. Dante told them not to forget that starting tomorrow people would start arriving at the mansion to organize a wedding. His intention was to make Ariana the most desired and beautiful bride in the country. Stop being so irrational. Ariana heard. Who knows? Maybe he will protect you like a rare treasure. In both Ariana's past and present life, this man was the only one who said he would cherish her. But now Dante said, with a smile, that he was suggesting that Ariana prepare herself completely. Yes, Your Highness, the girl replied. She said she would go and headed towards the door. But the Duke did not let her go. He approached again to ask her if she could remember what she had forgotten. Unfortunately, Ariana's memories have not returned yet. Dante said it would be better to find a way to refresh her memory. It was deep night. Ariana was sleeping in the mansion room, and moonlight fell on her bed. Her sleep was restless. She tossed and turned in bed and moaned. She felt as if she were still a little girl, quickly fleeing from an unknown danger. She had to run or she would die, but she stumbled on a stone on the way. She fell to the ground with a cry. She hit herself very hard when she fell. Very carefully, Ariana began to try to stand up. Ariana began to cry for her mother. Then she covered her head with her hands and called for her grandfather. Ariana woke up in her bed with that feeling of fear. She realized it was just a dream. In it, Ariana relived the day she lost her grandfather and mother when she was 10 years old. Every time she tried to think about those events, a sharp headache appeared, forcing her to stop. But for some reason, she dreamed of that day. Maybe it was because the Duke made her remember something. Perhaps Ariana was simply missing something important. During the day at the Lopez mansion, the maids discussed gossip. No one could believe that Miss Ariana, whom almost no one ignored, would become a duchess. After all, everyone knew that in this family, Miss Alina was always the most popular. And as the conversation turned to Miss Alina, everyone immediately remembered that she still hadn't left her room. One of the maids saw Wilhelm approaching her. The girls looked up thoughtfully. Indeed, Wilhelm entered Alina's room and said he knew she had stayed in her room since returning from the city. Alina replied that if he was going to give her a lecture, he better disappear. Wilhelm supposed that she had met the Marquis of Pettigrew, and Wilhelm also supposed that the Marquis had suggested that she take all the blame. Alina admitted that he wanted her to say that she had come to him without his consent. He told her that if she did, he would find her a good husband in another country. Wilhelm noted that as soon as Miss Helena left those lands, her life would be in grave danger. But the girl didn't immediately understand what he was talking about. Wilhelm explained that the Marquis was not one to leave evidence behind, and he knew perfectly well that if Helena died, no one would know the whole truth. What? Helena screamed in horror. She couldn't believe that Wilhelm had just suggested that Mr. Lucas was going to kill her. Wilhelm wasn't sure of it, but his words convinced Alina. Lucas said he didn't know why he should marry her. He really could have done it. Alina screamed for Wilhelm to do something. She was a Lopez, just like Edward and Ariana. How could the butler of her house stand by and watch while her life was in danger? Wilhelm replied that he had no intention of just standing by and watching. He said there was only one way to save herself. At that moment, in the Duke's mansion, Ariana was actively involved in the preparations for her own wedding. She was studying wedding catalogs, and the milliner looked at her curiously. She couldn't believe she was face to face with Ariana Lopez, the Duke's famous mistress. If she, Madame Evelyn, is chosen to make Ariana's wedding dress, she will become incredibly popular. She also expected considerable income, as the Duke was famous for his generosity. Ariana said that all these dresses were very beautiful. She chose the style that seemed most suitable to her. The only thing she didn't know was if she could stay within the planned budget. Ariana remembered that the milliner hadn't been told anything about this yet. She indicated that they had to stay within 50 million catons, which seemed to the milliner that she could afford anything. Madame Evelyn said that the young lady didn't need to worry, because all the dresses in the catalog were cheaper than the price Ariana had quoted her. Then Ariana said it wouldn't work for her, because the dress would supposedly cost more than 50 million. After all, his lordship forbade buying a dress that cost less. The limit was on the minimum cost, not the maximum, but all the jewelry in the room was not worth 100 million together. And Ariana noticed that Madame Evelyn was reacting exactly the same way as the jeweler she had met the day before. Ariana had no idea that she would become the most expensive bride in the country, and she couldn't even imagine that the Duke literally meant that. He said he knew he was asking too much, and that she would simply look for another store. Madame Evelyn exclaimed that they had imported silk from the East, and that they could make the skirt layers of the dress from many layers of that silk. You can also sew diamonds into the lace, and then the price of the dress will immediately increase. Ariana thought that this move could really work. Madame Evelyn asked Ariana to simply trust her in this matter. The milliner couldn't allow the biggest fish in the empire to slip through her fingers just because of some price restrictions. Ariana agreed and said she would look forward to the completion of her dress. Madame Evelyn noticed that her lordship seemed to love Lady Ariana very much, for he cherished her so much that it warmed her heart. Ariana thanked with a chuckle. Madame Evelyn said that the Duke had become a safe haven for the lady after all the troubles that had happened to her. Madame Evelyn intended to find out everything about this story, all the spicy details of the relationship between this couple. Ariana nodded and agreed that the Duke had helped her a lot during difficult times. Madame Evelyn decided to remember that the Duke had comforted Lady Ariana and suggested out loud that for Ariana, the most significant thing had been some special occasion. Ariana replied that if her interlocutor was talking about her fiancé's betrayal, then that's exactly how everything happened. She said that at first it irritated him a lot, because even though he knew about the betrayal, she had tried to marry her ex-fiancé, and Madame Evelyn had noted in her head that Lady Ariana's engagement had angered the Duke. Ariana, meanwhile, revealed that his lordship had saved her at the altar from a tragic life after marriage. Although the Duke's methods were aggressive, they helped Ariana come to her senses. She said that now she was sincerely grateful to his lordship for saving her. Mrs. Evelyn thought that she had always known that it had happened exactly like that. The Duke comforted the betrayed woman, only to fall in love with her himself. Maybe for him, her bitter tears were like knives piercing his heart. He risked his reputation to save her from disaster. Ariana added that, among other things, his lordship refrained from publicly discussing Lucas's betrayal. She said that he didn't want everyone to know how much pain Ariana was suffering. "Oh my God," Madame Evelyn exclaimed upon realizing that Lady Ariana might not be telling the truth. And then the Duke would be the only one to suffer the consequences of the interrupted wedding. It was an incredibly touching love story, and the heroine of this story was now sitting in front of Madame Evelyn and wanted her wedding dress to be made right there. In the heat of her emotions, Madame Evelyn impulsively jumped up. The milliner declared that she would make the most exquisite and beautiful dress in the world for Lady Ariana, and promised to do everything in her power to meet the client's expectations. Ariana almost burned from this burst of enthusiasm and thanked Madame Evelyn. Madame Evelyn felt inspired, and Ariana hoped the woman was good at spreading rumors. She told the same thing to the other merchants she met during the wedding preparations. She was sure that her version of events would soon be known to all of high society. If she is lucky, this will fill all the gaps in her relationship with Dante. This marriage should look like a perfect love story until their contract is complete. The Hegenberg mansion was filled with light and music. The guests were impressed by the fact that the famous house was completely open for the wedding. The music was played by the same orchestra that played in the square. Many couldn't wait to hear their wedding anthem. And then the wedding bells rang, announcing the imminent arrival of the bride and groom. The doors burst open, letting in blinding light. Oh, how beautiful the bride looked, from her shoes to her ceremonial tiara. It was hard to believe what their eyes saw when she entered the hall. Together with the Duke, they made a brilliant couple. Madame Evelyn burst into tears. That day seemed like the best of her life. Ariana's heart beat wildly. She herself didn't understand why she was so nervous, because this was not her first wedding. The priest asked if Duke Dante Heijenberg vows to love and care for his fiancée forever. Of course, Dante replied with a smile. Then, the priest turned to Lady Ariana Lopez and asked if she was ready to take her marriage vows. There was silence in the room for a moment, and then Ariana gave her consent. "I do," she said. "Don't forget, Ariana," said Dante, turning to his bride. He whispered to her that she was participating in all this of her own free will. With these words, the Duke kissed Ariana. The wedding took place amidst numerous applause and cries of admiration from the guests. Once again, the beautiful music of their orchestra sounded, and the guests could enjoy the delicacies. The sounds of the violin spread everywhere. Dante commented on the magnificent melody and jokingly asked who composed it, and Ariana ignored his constant teasing. Dante replied that he was not making fun of her at all, because everyone was very surprised when she said that Ariana composed the music. Now everyone looks forward to performing at the Foundation Festival. Ariana asked in disbelief if the Duke really thought so. Dante assured her that it was indeed so, and then added that he himself expected something more. When Ariana didn't understand what he was talking about, he whispered to her that he hoped she didn't think they would sleep separately on their wedding night. Ariana blushed and had no idea what to say. Ariana, Elena called her, appearing in a luxurious dress among the guests, said that her sister looked beautiful. With a smile, she congratulated Ariana on her wedding and said she was very happy for her. No one expected her to have the courage to appear at this wedding reception. The people attending the celebration murmured that Alina's appearance was insolent. They didn't understand how she got there. Madame Evelyn rushed to intervene and asked the unexpected guest what had brought her here, and if Miss Alina Lopez wasn't ashamed to appear there after all. Alina bowed her head dramatically and said regretfully that she was very sorry. The girl was trembling, and Madame Evelyn asked her why she was trembling so much. "Ah," said Ariana, and ordered her to raise her head. With demonstrative sobs, Alina said that she simply intended to congratulate Ariana, that she was only here for that. Ariana thought that her sister had significantly improved her acting skills since their last meeting. She had clearly applied white makeup on her face to look pale and haggard, and she had painted her eyes to look like she had been crying a lot. Alina assured that Ariana really looks very good. She is not lying when she thinks that she and the Duke look very good together. The guests were surprised as they discussed whether this was the same conversation Alina had come here for. It was unheard of, as almost no one would want to receive blessings from a person like her. Alina said, with a miserable look, that it seemed she shouldn't have come here at all. She just thought that, when Ariana became a duchess, they wouldn't be able to see each other anymore. At least she understood that. And Alina said there was something Ariana should know. Alina said she didn't have the courage to talk about it before. Ariana asked what it was and told Alina to tell her. She wanted to see what trick her sister would use this time. At that moment, a young man, burning with indignation, joined the conversation and declared that Miss Alina was in fact the victim, and that everyone had simply misunderstood the situation. This man was the only son of the Schmidt family. His name was Adolf, but Ariana didn't understand why he was taking Alina's side. Adolf exclaimed that there was something Ariana simply didn't know yet. Miss Alina was a victim. The Duke pulled his fiancée towards him. He said that today the bride should be the happiest in the world. The Duke expressed doubt that Adolf's story was important enough to disturb Ariane on such a special day for her. Adolf felt the oppressive presence of the Duke and could not utter another word. Alina told him that everything was fine. It just seemed that her sister still didn't want to see him. Looking at the dejected girl, Adolf thought that she was very unhappy and that he must protect her at all costs. He clenched his fists and told the Duke that his story was important. Adolf said that Lady Ariana should not separate from her beautiful sister because of the words of this lying man. Few people understood who Adolf called a liar, but the young man exclaimed that those words could refer to no one but Lucas Pettigrew. According to him, it was Lucas who harassed Miss Alina and confessed his love to her. Miss Alina was shocked and scared by his behavior, but had no choice but to suffer in silence. After all, Alina was very afraid that her sister would find out everything, and Ariana's heart would break from her fiancé's betrayal. This whole passionate speech was met with a rather cold reaction from the audience. Ariana looked at her sister and wondered if these people really thought anyone would believe them after everything that had happened. Adolf clenched his teeth with enthusiasm. He claimed that there was evidence, because Alina and he had been in a relationship this whole time. They were even secretly engaged from everyone. This news had already caught the attention of the public, as there was curiosity as to whether the engagement could really unite Alina Lopez and Adolf Schmidt. Alina thought with a smile that sweet and naive Adolf was diligently providing her with an alibi, without even thinking that she was deceiving him. Suddenly, Ariana approached her sister and said that she asked for permission to give her sincere advice. She leaned towards her ear and whispered that she would only say it once, so she should listen carefully. She said it wasn't the best option for her. Alina didn't understand what Ariana meant by options. The Schmidt house, Adolf's family, was one of the richest aristocratic houses in the country, and Adolf himself was so stupid and weak that a couple of tears and a few insinuations would be enough to make his mouth water, and Alina would receive all his possessions on a silver platter. Ariana probably only said the bad option because she was jealous, so Alina smiled and said she had no idea what her sister meant. "I see," said Ariana with a mysterious smile. She knew that Adolf would be a good match for Alina, as he was the type of man she could control most easily. But unfortunately, he would soon discover that he had some very important flaws, such as cultivating and distributing illegal plants, as well as stalking and kidnapping people. All his crimes will soon come to light, and he will go to jail. To top it off, the shipping company his family invested in turns out to be a scam. which leads them to bankruptcy. First a sexual deviant, and now a future criminal, Ariana thought. Elena had a real talent for finding terrible men for herself. Elena sobbed and said she didn't expect her sister to believe her immediately. She always knew that this bothered Ariana. The fact that the Marquis was always kind only to Elena, having said this for everyone to hear. Elena thought that Ariana should wait a little longer, and people would start hating her. And not Elena at all. Elena's eyes sparkled with tears, and she said that every time the Marquis came, Ariana told her to take off her makeup and put on rags. Elena hoped that people would not remain indifferent to her if she managed to arouse their sympathy with a pitiful story. And so she swore out loud that she never intended to seduce her sister's fiancé. The audience began to whisper, discussing the fact that the Duchess might be jealous of someone like this woman. But in their voices, there was none of the sympathy Elena expected, and her cheeks flushed with emotion. She looked at Ariana's face and realized that she was simply laughing at her. "So this is how you responded to my advice," said Ariana, and added that now everything was clear to her. And Elena asked why her sister was behaving so strangely. Ariana asked if Elena's words were true, if Lucas forced her to do all this, even what they did in the dressing room. Elena bowed her head and replied that she didn't remember at all what they were doing there. But yes, that she absolutely did not want to participate in his affairs. Ariana thoughtfully noted that the Marquis seemed to be an even crueler person than she thought. So he should be punished now. Elena hoped that her sister would really believe her and say that they couldn't do anything, because the Marquis was untouchable. "Oh yes," said Ariana. She knew they were talking about that special immunity that gave the Marquis the right not to be arrested, or to avoid investigation of minor crimes. Ariana pointed out that immunity was not without vulnerability, and that even a nobleman could be charged if enough people voted for it. Ariana smiled and suggested that Elena report Lucas to the authorities, expressing her confidence that all the guests present would help her. "Isn't that right?" she asked the surrounding guests. Everyone began to whisper among themselves with great enthusiasm. It seemed that someone wanted the nobleman to be reported, and yet it would be better to show themselves well in front of the future Duchess. This was more important than clinging to Pettigrew at the time of his collapse. Madame Evelyn was the first to volunteer to help. This encouraged other guests to join her. Ariana commented with a smile that the Marquis would not stand a chance with the support of so many people. Elena was horrified and didn't understand what was happening, as she never wanted to do something as complicated as reporting Lucas. She was just trying to change public opinion. Elena tried to remind Ariana that Lord Lucas was a Marquis, and therefore, acting against him could be dangerous. Ariana said that Elena shouldn't worry, because she just needed to look at all these people who wanted to help. Ariana affirmed that in the end the truth always comes out. Elena and Adolf continued their conversation in the carriage. The young man thought that everything had gone well. He was glad that now that evil Marquis would pay for all his crimes. Elena thought that Lucas would not be punished. Without precise evidence, the investigation would stall. Adolf thought, looking at the girl's worried face, that poor sweet Elena was worried about so many things, that he had to help her in this difficult time. He assured the girl that the Marquis's reputation would suffer if he were interrogated by the city guard. Elena thought that Adolf was right. Once the investigation began, Lucas's reputation would take a severe hit. Now that was the only thing she could be sure of. She clung to Adolf and said she was very happy that he was there to support her. Adolf replied that he would always be there for dear Elena. Elena thought that no one would have predicted that Ariana would suddenly help her. Perhaps, having become a duchess, she simply let her guard down. But something still bothered her. It was not clear how the hell Ariana managed to seduce the unapproachable Duke, who hadn't even given in to Helen's charms until recently. The sister had no connection to this man. Elena seriously doubted that these two really loved each other. Most likely, they had made some kind of deal. But suddenly, a conjecture came to her mind. She remembered the score that Edward said Arian had taken with her, the one belonging to her grandfather. Then Elena said that she had always thought that her brother said he hated that old music, and rickety written by a dead man. Edward asked her if she had any idea how much it could cost, as these things only got more expensive over time. Edward exclaimed that perhaps, if they wanted, they could join the imperial family. Now Elena understood that the only thing Ariana had, and that was worth trading, was Edward Lopez's score, which was probably the price she paid to become Duke Havengur's wife. But Elena could take this place too. That afternoon, a bright butterfly flew to the window, just as Ariana was bathing. The butterfly approached the girl. Butterflies always reminded Ariana of a certain piece of music. Trilogy of the Fantastic Butterfly. This was one of the most popular works written by Ariana's grandfather. The trilogy was widely known during his lifetime, but unfortunately, the third and final part of the work was lost after the grandfather's death in a carriage accident. And so, 3 years later, at the Foundation Festival, Edward was going to present the third part of the Fantastic Butterfly, which everyone thought was lost forever. With this, he will be able to gain unprecedented wealth and fame. In other words, he used the notes he found while going through the things his grandfather left behind. And now he can raise his status. Ariana managed to take a couple of scores when she left the mansion, but most of her grandfather's works remained hidden. Ariana thought that she needed to get them back, and not just the trilogy but everything. After getting out of the bath, Ariana wondered if the Duke was back yet. After the bath, the girl felt different. It was as if she were a plant soaked in rose oil. Suddenly, something caught the girl's attention. It was a surprise from the maid, who tried to make her mistress's wedding night perfect. These preparations infuriated Ariana. It was natural for couples to share a bed on their wedding night, and it wasn't that she didn't expect it. The Duke made his intentions clear that day. He said he refused to make a show. A clumsy forgery was worse than nothing. To be honest, Ariana doubted that anything would happen today, because only 5 years would pass. It would be an insignificant rumor that the Duke was incapable of sleeping with a woman, since he never denied all these rumors. Most likely, they were true. But one thought haunted Ariana. At least, the Duke can definitely kiss a woman. And the kiss Ariana received was surprisingly good. What are you thinking about so intently? Dante's voice resonated, distracting the girl from the thoughts that had captured her. She was startled and exclaimed that she hadn't noticed him enter. Dante said that as soon as he entered, Ariana bowed her head. "Oh," she said. It was because of guilt. The Duke asked her why, and she replied that her sister had ruined her wedding celebration, and that had been bothering her mind all day. She thought that even if her apology was just a cover, it didn't make it less sincere. She didn't know that Alina would use the wedding for her performance, and would even drag Adolf into this mess. Dante indifferently assured her that it didn't matter, because that wasn't the main part of the wedding. The most important things happened during the night. Dante noticed the jealousy Ariana showed at the reception. He said that now she looked like a trembling rabbit, about to be devoured. This aroused his interest. He wanted to know what face Ariana would make if he pressed further. With these words, the Duke kissed the girl. She knew that all this was just a plan for revenge, but what was happening was becoming increasingly fascinating to her. Dante picked her up in his arms. Soon Ariana found herself thrown onto the bed, with the Duke floating above her. He kissed her, and the girl didn't understand why. Her heart beat very fast because of his actions. Ariana Lopez, he said. She had heard her name thousands of times, but somehow now it sounded so unfamiliar to her. No, Dante corrected himself. Now she was Ariana Heijenberg. He kissed her again. Ariana wondered what would happen if he heard her heartbeat. She entered this marriage only to complete her revenge. But now, under the Duke's gaze, everything became too vague. "I give up," Dante suddenly said. Ariana asked, surprised, where he was going. The Duke replied that if he stayed, he most likely wouldn't be able to control himself. Pride will not allow him to share a bed with a girl whose mind is so far away. Dante told Ariana to listen to him carefully and said he knew how pleasant revenge could be. And he also knew very, very well how quickly one can become addicted to this sweet taste. Ariana thought about what she knew about Dante Heijenberg. As an illegitimate son, he won countless battles. He managed to become Duke, despite the objections of his elders. There was no one better suited to talk about revenge. She wondered what he felt that day when he crushed all his enemies and reached his own peak. Was he happy or devastated? That was what Ariana wanted to know. Ariana pulled the Duke towards her. She wanted to know more about him. "Stop," Ariana thought, surprised by what she had just said. The Duke commented that if he hadn't met Ariana, he would have taken those words as an attempt to seduce him. The girl stammered and tried to explain to him that it wasn't what he thought, but that she didn't know much about Dante. He said with a smile that he understood. "Ariana," said the Duke, touching her face again. He said there was something she needed to understand. From that day on, she lives here with Dante Heijenberg. And later, they will be able to find out who owes whom what. It was a bright and sunny morning with birds singing loudly, and Ariana hadn't been able to close her eyes the night before. Dante told her that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to control himself. She didn't understand what he meant by that. Perhaps he was about to say that he couldn't go further. He was probably trying to hide this uncomfortable fact in this way. Ariana thought that now was not the time to think about such nonsense, because her revenge was not over. Ariana had a long way to go. She needed to concentrate, and now she had a new debt. Dante himself said that later it would be found out who owes whom what. She remembered these words about duty. Making these people suffer for betraying her was Ariana's only goal. She wanted them to pay for everything they did to her. She never thought about what she would do after that, and now she has a new debt to pay. When all this is over, she will have to think about this too now. She couldn't even imagine what would happen to their relationship then. At that moment, this is what was happening at the Pettigrew mansion. Someone was breaking dishes while cursing. Lucas Pettigrew was furious because she dared to marry another man. But at first, he thought it was just a simple insult. But Ariana was serious about ending everything. But no one could have predicted that Ariana would simply find a new owner. Lucas could only curse nonstop. No, he just couldn't ignore it. After all, Ariana loved him. He knew that for sure. Maybe she would still believe him if he told her that Alina forced him to drink a forbidden aphrodisiac. It won't be that hard to fabricate evidence. You just have to bribe the doctor. A noise behind the door caught Lucas's attention. He didn't quite understand what could be happening there. It was guards. They asked how they dared to be treated there, with such rudeness and unfriendliness. The Marquise replied that the House of Pettigrew was one of the founders of the empire. Lucas asked his mother what was wrong with her. He wanted to know who these people were. One of the guards announced that Marquis Lucas Pettigrew had been accused of sexual assault, and that they were now there to take him for questioning. What nonsense, Lucas said indignantly, and reminded them of his own status of immunity. The guards explained to him that they feared his immunity would be temporarily invalidated. Since the accusation had received the support of more than 10 people, Lucas was perplexed, not knowing who could support such a ridiculous accusation against him. Unfortunately, the guards replied that they had no right to reveal the identity of those people. Lucas affirmed that he knew for sure that it was a group of strangers. However, the number of followers amounted to more than 35 people. This number turned out to be unexpectedly large, which surprised Lucas. The guard said that's why His Grace would have to go with them now. "Let me go," Lucas shouted and repeated. As the guards took him away, the Marquise remained lying on the floor deeply fainted, and the maids whispered that maybe she wouldn't survive another blow. And so Lucas, the head of the noble house of Pettigrew, one of the founders of the empire, the elite among the elite, was locked behind the bars of a dungeon. He thought of Alina Lopez, that small, evil wretch who dared to claim that he forced her to have sex. She will pay him back for her shameless lie. This flirt will start chasing him as soon as she manages to get out of here. He was going to do many things, but now his thoughts about the place were interrupted by the sound of heels. Ariana approached the bars. The girl greeted Lucas with a smile, calling him Lord Pettigrew. Lucas looked at her. He always knew that Ariana was beautiful, but he had no idea that she could be so good-looking. If she had been smart enough to look like this before, Lucas would never have noticed Alina. "Ariana, my love," said Lucas looking at the girl, and asked her if she had any idea how much he missed her. Now he was so glad she was there, because they really needed to talk. But Ariana only said that the investigators were currently searching the Pettigrew mansion. "What?" Lucas exclaimed. "On what grounds?" With a wide smile, Ariana replied that the reason was herself. She told the guards that she saw Lucas sexually harassing Alina in the mansion. She explained to them that they would find evidence in the garden and on the roof. Lucas didn't believe there was any evidence of what happened to them. He suddenly realized that the girl had mentioned the rooftop garden, and he tried to understand why she mentioned that place. Ariana pointed out that no one would really find any evidence of Lucas's infidelity there. But that didn't matter. By a strange coincidence, Ariana's testimony will lead to the discovery of something more suspicious. "You wouldn't dare," Lucas screamed in fear, but the girl replied that she already dared. She found Lucas's secret ledger. Lucas didn't understand how Ariana could know about the secret ledger that was created to avoid paying taxes, which even contained records of illegal slave purchases. Only Lucas himself knew about the existence of these records. His mother and his late father asked how Ariana found out. The girl simply smiled triumphantly in response. In her past life, Marquise Pettigrew forced Ariana to keep this ledger. The Marquise wondered how Ariana could support her husband if small sums escaped her. And then Ariana could only apologize for her mistakes. "But I'm afraid you didn't mention anything about the fees," she said one day. And the Marquise asked her if Ariana meant that everything was her fault. The Marquise coldly said that before she was worried that Ariana would not give her son an heir. But now she understood that it was for the best. Their family doesn't need a silly girl like Ariana, who would later tarnish the Pettigrew name. The reason the Marquise forced Ariana to keep the ledger was mistrust. She needed someone to blame if something happened. Maybe the day Ariana was run over by a car was not at all the day she died. Maybe she had been dead for a long time. Ariana realized that she had been incredibly stupid. Lucas exclaimed that she was trying to contaminate his family with her shameless lies. But she wouldn't get away with it. Ariana asked him if he knew that the Marquise had been resorting to moneylenders a lot lately. But it seemed to Lucas that the girl was also trying to insult his mother. Ariana leaned towards him and told him that he should understand that not even the wealth of the Pettigrew family was eternal. If one only chose the most expensive and bought everything in the latest fashion, Lucas couldn't believe her words. Ruin was impossible for their house. With a smile, Ariana said that he was absolutely right. His mother chose moneylenders with the lowest interest rate. The problem, according to Ariana, was that this company was financing the Dawn League, something the Marquise knew nothing about. The Dawn League was the same group that was going to place the disgraced prince on the throne. If people find out that the house of one of the empire's founders is financed by a group of traitors, it is unknown what will happen to them. Lucas simply couldn't believe it. He couldn't understand how a woman, whose only talent was composing music, had managed to find out not only about the existence of a secret organization, but also about the affairs of the Marquise of Pettigrew. Ariana enjoyed watching Lucas deny everything. She was going to make his imminent despair even sweeter. Lucas asked if the reasons why Ariana had changed so much were his fault. It was he who told the girl to fix everything. Lucas was very angry with Dante Heijenberg, because Lucas himself was the first to notice Ariana's talent. It was he who saw Ariana playing the piano in the corner of the room, flinching at every look her brother directed at her. It was Lucas who first recognized the girl's abilities, gave her his love, and then this bastard appeared. Love, Ariana thought thoughtfully. No, what Lucas gave her was not love at all, but something like a rotten piece of fruit. It was very attractive on the outside, but inside it was nothing but rot. With these words, Ariana left and Lucas could only shout after her. "Ariana," he called her, putting his hand through the bars. At this moment in the imperial palace, it was discussed that this audacity was simply unimaginable. Slave buying, tax evasion, all this was simply an unimaginable fall for one of the founding houses. Dante Heijenberg, the emperor, said gravely. "Yes, your majesty," he replied, thinking of the butterfly that had created a real storm. The emperor said thoughtfully that the house of Pettigrew was no longer what it used to be, but they still had the audacity to consider the empire fools. If the duchess hadn't pointed out the rooftop garden, no one would have noticed anything. The emperor wondered if it was a coincidence. The duke replied that he feared he could not comment on that, as sometimes even he found it difficult to predict her actions. The emperor asked him if he really knew so little about the woman he had married. Dante replied that his wife was full of surprises, which is why he was captivated by her charms. The emperor noticed that the duke was evading the answer, as always, but there was no need to try to deceive him. He saw that there was something between these two. Dante assumed His Majesty meant their passionate love, and the emperor exclaimed that talking to him was like talking to a wall. 10 years have passed since the Heijenberg house sent Dante to fight in the war against the savages. Wanting to get rid of their troublesome offspring, they signed his death warrant. However, Dante returned as a hero. He was too capable to leave things as they were. The emperor asked if Dante had ever thought about divorcing Ariana and marrying the princess, but the duke simply asked if His Majesty was going crazy. The emperor explained that the crown prince was diligent, but too stupid, and that this empire needed a strong leader. Dante replied that he would simply pretend not to have heard anything His Majesty just said. And the emperor asked if he would at least pretend to think about it. The duke affirmed that he and his wife had already fulfilled their marital duty, and now he couldn't call himself a man if he wasn't faithful to her. The emperor realized that Dante knew how to keep a woman, but there were rumors that the duke had certain problems. Dante said he wanted to know who was spreading such rumors about him. This conversation was interrupted by one of the imperial courtiers, when he entered the hall. The courtier informed the emperor that new information had emerged regarding the investigation. They received an anonymous tip that the group to whom Marquise Pettigrew had borrowed money was linked to the Dawn League. The situation was becoming increasingly absurd. The House of the Empire's founder was financed by a group of traitors. Meanwhile, the Duke's carriage arrived at the gate. Ariana was there, thinking that the investigators had probably already found out everything. Since she sent a letter detailing where the money had disappeared, it was inevitable that there would be unrest for a while. The coachman informed his lordship that they had arrived. The carriage door burst open. It was the Duke, looking at Ariana, who noticed that his butterfly seemed to like flying where it shouldn't. He said that since they were married, she didn't have to address him formally, nor call him Duke or Grace, and that she should no longer see her ex-fiancé. Ariana explained that she simply wanted to say in person that the family Lucas was so proud of would now be famous for debts. But the Duke asked if that anonymous letter was her doing. He noticed that he had a strange feeling he couldn't shake off, as if Ariana was always hiding something from him. Ariana said that his lordship was right. She was one of those who sent the anonymous letters. She knew that if the Marquise's personal and legal loans became known, the reputation of the Pettigrew family would be seriously damaged. The Duke asked if this meant that Ariana didn't expect this to lead to the takeover of the Dawn League. Ariana pretended that she had never heard that name. The Duke replied that thanks to her letter, they discovered that the Froken pawnshop was secretly financing the League. Ariana affirmed that she knew nothing about it. She had no intention of telling the Duke that she had any idea about the existence of the Dawn League. Ariana learned about the collaboration between Froken's pawnshop and the Dawn League a few days before her death, so now it was better for her to just keep silent. The Duke told her that such an important matter had led to an exhaustive search, and Ariana pretended to sigh that Lucas had terrible bad luck in thinking that such a noble house as Pettigrew had fallen so low. The Duke replied that it would have sounded more convincing if Ariana's eyes hadn't smiled so clearly when she said those words. And the girl replied that it seemed she needed practice in the art of controlling her emotions. The Duke leaned towards the girl and told her that sometimes she could be really charming. Then he said he would ask the coachman to turn the carriage around because they needed to go to the palace. When Ariana asked why, Dante replied with a mysterious smile that His Majesty wished to see the young lady, who had become the Duchess of Heisenberg. Ariana had no idea what His Majesty might want from her. The girl made a respectful bow to greet the Emperor. The Emperor realized that it must be Ariana standing before him. She really looked remarkably different from his daughter. The Emperor asked if these were the kind of women Duke Heisenberg liked, which confused Ariana. The Duke asked His Majesty to refrain from making such comments about his wife, to which the Emperor commented that the Duke was being overly talkative today. The Emperor turned to Ariana again and told her that, since her information had led to the capture of conspirators who wanted to harm the Empire, the girl needed to be rewarded. He asked if Ariana had any wish he could grant. Ariana thought about what reward she might receive personally from the Emperor. She had the courage to address His Majesty. Ariana said she would be honored if she were allowed to perform at the Foundation Festival. The Emperor thought about it seriously. Of course, he could remember how Edward Lopez, the unparalleled virtuoso, visited the palace on the arm of his granddaughter. The girl was still very young, but the musician took her with him on stage. The girl turned out to have a wonderful nightingale voice. It seems that now she has turned into a beautiful young lady. Ariana remembered those happy moments very well. That's exactly how everything was. The Emperor said that, since Ariana had already demonstrated her talent that day, she could now sing as much as she wanted. This surprised the young lady, as she hadn't said she would sing herself. But after thinking about it, she understood why the Emperor had decided that, since normally women do not write music or conduct scenes. Ariana said she was very grateful that His Majesty was willing to grant her request, but the performance she asked for did not involve singing on stage. Her wish was to perform as a composer. The Emperor did not expect these words from the girl. It was also worth thinking about this carefully. Ariana decided that perhaps she was asking too much. No woman had ever debuted at the Foundation Festival. Suddenly, applause was heard, and the Duke, clapping loudly, announced that the Emperor had just gained 5 billion caden. The Emperor didn't understand what the Duke meant, and Dante explained to him that this was the amount he intended to pay after hearing the song Ariana had written. since the girl intended to perform her masterpiece at the festival for free. The emperor could become 5 billion kaden richer. The emperor was sure that the duke was simply exaggerating, as he couldn't seriously try to pay 5 billion for a single song. The duke replied that the value of a good song never diminishes, no matter how many times it is sold, and that its value only increases over time as the song becomes more popular and more expensive. Dante was convinced that the true value of art goes far beyond the work itself, and upon hearing his words, Ariana thought that this was exactly what she had always believed. The Duke added that he hadn't mentioned yet that His Majesty could take the opportunity to finally knock the Kingdom of End off its pedestal. "These unfortunate End," murmured the Emperor. They didn't even bother to try to hide their mocking smiles. He remembered the words about the lack of aristocracy, which he didn't quite understand. Dante realized that all this was not like in the life of the great virtuoso. The Emperor exclaimed that, of course, all this was not the case. Before, it was completely different. Even the scoundrels from End couldn't help but be impressed by the music of Eduardo Lopez. Royalty from all over the world came and personally begged him to perform in their country. Dante remembered that, by an incredible stroke of luck, the granddaughter of this virtuoso was now standing there, before His Majesty. His Majesty's gaze shone as he turned to Ariana. The Emperor asked if he would allow the girl to perform at the Foundation Festival, if she could promise him that she would bring this vile Kingdom of End to its knees. "I swear," said Ariana decisively, and promised to put her heart and soul into bringing glory to the Empire. The Emperor liked her response and suggested that, since Duke Heijenberg trusted his wife's talent so much, there were no restrictions on allowing her to perform. She will be the last of all to perform at the festival. Ariana thanked His Majesty and assured him that she would not disappoint him. She thought that Dante had helped her, that he had made the Emperor see in her not an uneducated woman in music. He emphasized that Ariana was the one who inherited the talent of the outstanding composer. If it weren't for his help, it's unlikely that everything would have gone so smoothly. Dante caught Ariana's gaze and, leaning towards the girl, whispered to her that he would ask his lady to save that passionate look for those moments when they were alone. Burning young love," said the Emperor, moved by looking at the blushing Ariana. At that moment, in the Lopez mansion, a completely different scene was unfolding. Enraged, Edward smashed everything around him, not understanding why he kept paying the refund. Because a long time ago, he had fired all those useless servants who were sucking his money. And now it was not clear where the new expenses would come from. He decided that it was all the fault of the insolent boy who stole his orchestra from him. If it weren't for him and Ariana, Edward would have already prepared a masterpiece for the Foundation Festival. Sitting on a pile of money, the butler who entered informed the master that a guest had come to see him, but Edward had ordered everyone to tell him that he was not in the mansion. But this guest was remarkably different from the others. The problem is that this guest intended to invest in Edward. Edward simply couldn't believe what was happening. Of course, he immediately met this man and asked him how exactly the guest found out about him. The stranger explained that he had been following Edward since his days at the End Royal Academy of Arts. He said he always believed that Edward would grow up to be a great composer, but he was bewildered by the rumors of the recent scandal in the Lopez family. Maybe it was in his power to help this house, but Edward simply didn't understand how. The stranger knew that Eduardo owed a significant amount to the Imperial Bank and asked permission to cover that debt. In addition, he could provide support by performing at the upcoming Foundation Festival. He expressed his confidence that a person with as much talent as Edward would get noticed even at such a prestigious event for Edward. This was a great opportunity, because performing at the Foundation Festival was the dream of any artist. The guest said that a small demonstration of talent and success in the creative field would be guaranteed for Edward. However, since the stranger was offering Edward a colossal amount of money, the stakes were incredibly high. He feared that this was the only way to obtain the right to perform at the festival, and Edward was grateful for it. The guest expressed his confidence that the esteemed guests would be sophisticated enough to recognize the artist's worth. Edward agreed with this, because in his opinion, the only reason that had prevented him from spreading his wings so far was the ignorant fools surrounding him. And when he finally had the chance to be the center of attention, that mean girl, Ariana, ruined everything. But it seems that luck never abandons true talent. Edward noticed that he and the guest had not introduced themselves. He asked his name. The guest smiled. He shook his interlocutor's hand and said his name was Leonard. In the morning, at the Duke's residence, Ariana heard the maid calling her. The maid burst into her lordship's rooms with a new newspaper to ask if Ariana had read it. Ariana looked at Sophie with a very sad look. The maid realized that her mistress had been awake all night again, writing, and she had repeatedly reproached her that it would be bad for her health. But Ariana had objected that she was fine. The newspaper headline stated that the crimes of Eduard Lopez had been discovered. Sophie asked her if the lady knew that the servants of the Lopez estate had been expelled without receiving a penny. Ariana replied that it seemed the newspapers were receiving increasingly varied stories from people who had suffered at the hands of her brother. Ariana asked Sophie why she hadn't left yet. Ariana wanted Sophie to leave the Lopez property and become her personal maid starting that day. Sophie asked happily if the lady really wanted this, because she herself, of course, would be happy. Ariana expressed her regret for not being able to take the maid sooner, but Sophie said there was no need to worry about that. Ariana asked Sophie if she wanted to hear the melody she had composed, which took her all night. Ariana sat down in front of the instrument and began to play. Sophie froze beside her, feeling how wonderful it was. When she finished, Ariana asked which of the two melodies her first listener liked more. Sophie replied that the first was exquisite, but the second was simply magnificent. The truth is she couldn't choose which of the two was better. Ariana said thoughtfully that this meant both melodies were mediocre. She explained to the bewildered maid that if both were beautiful, it could mean that both were nothing remarkable. Sophie cried out that she didn't mean that at all, that she actually just liked both, that she couldn't express her feelings in any way, and wished more than ever for a richer vocabulary. Ariana murmured that just sounding nice wasn't enough. Her work must be so powerful that people immediately understand what it is. The composition must melt the hearts of the listeners with its fire. This is exactly the kind of music the grandfather would have written. But Ariana couldn't achieve the ideal. Sophie was the first to notice what was happening outside the window. She informed her mistress that it was the merchant's carriage that had arrived, and she supposed that her lordship wished to buy more dresses and jewelry for his wife. Ariana thought sadly about how long it would take her to try on the dresses, with so little time left before the foundation festival. The butler informed her that Duke Heijenberg had called instrument merchants for his grace, so she should go out to visit them for a minute. Ariana suddenly realized that he was talking about the instrument merchants. The butler explained that he had asked them to arrange the products in the music room, and he clarified what had been done wrong. Ariana smiled and said she would go there immediately. Gathering her skirts, she quickly went downstairs. She couldn't believe there were instrument merchants there. With her heart beating fast, the girl opened the door to the music room. The piano, violins, and cello were placed there, on special stands. Ariana had the feeling that all the instruments in the world were gathered here. In her past life, Ariana believed that one piano was enough to write music. Lucas told her that she should be grateful to be able to compose her own music on this quality instrument that he had found for her. The truth was that Ariana really wanted to believe him and thank him for his care and love. She focused so much on the piano because it was the only instrument she was allowed to play freely. As for the rest, she could only imagine how they sounded. Now all this magnificence available to her appeared before the girl. Here was a harp, whose unique sound made it my grandfather's favorite instrument. The harp was the first thing Ariana's father sold after her grandfather died. She thought she had forgotten how to play it, but it seemed the body remembered everything. "I'm impressed," a voice suddenly said behind Ariana. Dante entered the room unnoticed, and now said that he had never suspected that his young wife also owned that instrument. Ariana thought that he had bought such an expensive instrument without even knowing if Ariana could play it. She explained that she was not a professional, but her grandfather taught her to play most instruments. The Duke realized that she really was talented in many aspects. Approaching, Dante added that this was exactly what was expected of his wife. Looking the girl in the eyes, the Duke asked her what else she was capable of. He suggested that maybe she could also sing. Ariana's heart beat wildly in her chest. She didn't understand why he suddenly asked her about that. It was because of what His Majesty said that day. The Emperor said that it seemed the girl with the nightingale voice had turned into a beautiful young lady. Ariana wasn't entirely sure she could do it, because she hadn't sung a single note since that day. She clenched her fists and said she would try. "If we see it as compensation for the expensive tools, The price seemed quite low. But when Ariana tried to sing, she felt a tremor. She ran out of breath and couldn't take another breath. Dante ran towards the girl to support her. He said she was trembling like a leaf, and then asked her if she was okay. The Duke said she didn't have to sing if she didn't want to. Dante told her never to force herself to do something she didn't want to do. Ariana explained that it wasn't because she didn't like singing. She used to enjoy it, and Dante said he knew that. Ariana didn't understand what he was talking about, and the Duke asked her to tell him what was wrong. And the girl decided to tell him about her debut at the ball. When she was 15, on the day of her performance, for some reason, everything went wrong. The audience said that her singing would surely be great. She is the only granddaughter of Eduardo Lopez. People simply couldn't wait for the show to start. The song was ridiculously loud from the start, and the sound was such that it could be heard from afar. Still, Ariana managed to sing, and suddenly she felt her throat closing, and she couldn't breathe. Ariana fell to the ground, clutching her throat, and the spectators began to talk about her illness, worried that it might be contagious. Ariana has always had a terrible allergy to oysters, and that day she had symptoms as if she had eaten a whole bucket of them. They angrily asked her what she had eaten the day before. They scolded her for daring to get into such a state. They reproached her that she couldn't even imagine how disgusting everything looked. Edward shouted that all she had to do was act correctly, but she couldn't even do that. She had stained her family's musical legacy. According to her brother, Ariana made her family a laughingstock for the first time. Later, Ariana realized that Alina had given her a glass of fruit juice just before going on stage. Now Ariana thought that her sister had put something in her glass. Dante said that the more he hears about her family, the more he hates them all. Ariana thought that the Duke was angry because of her. No one had ever done this for her before, and now her heart was acting strangely. The girl apologized for complaining about her troubles. She understood that all this had happened a long time ago and wanted to assure him that it would not happen again. But the tears wouldn't let her finish. Dante pulled her to him and asked her to save her toughness for other people, because it didn't work with him. He asked her not to cry anymore. He will no longer ask her to sing if she doesn't want to. Now they no longer had to pretend to be a loving couple because no one could see them. There was no one around. And yet he continued to kiss her, very tenderly. That night, already in their bed, Ariana tried in vain to compose herself. She shouldn't have reacted like that to the Duke. She needed to concentrate on her work. Besides, the Duke had probably done similar things countless times. That's probably why he was so good. Ariana couldn't stop thinking about those kisses. Dante himself stopped and moved away from the girl. He said he was trying to restrain himself until she remembered, but her amnesia was disturbing him. It was starting to feel like torture. Ariana didn't know that a man with such distress could really react this way. There were many things unclear about this situation, and yet it was already time for Ariana to sleep. She dreamed of that terrible night when she heard a voice calling her, but she ran through the darkness with the last of her strength, and her terrifying pursuer was not far behind her. Ariana managed to scream before stumbling. She fell into the water with a splash and began to sink into the depths. Someone was nearby. Someone grabbed her. Upstairs she heard a very close, determined voice. "Wake up!" His voice called her again. That creepy forest. The second time the girl saw this dream. It wasn't just a nightmare. Maybe it had something to do with those lost memories that her lordship was reminding her of. Ariana couldn't get the image of that forest out of her head. Here it is. She thought suddenly. She thought she had found the answer. Now she knew that people would only remember the music that moved their feelings as soon as they heard it. Likewise, scary stories disturb sleep much more than beautiful fairy tales, and nightmares stay in the mind much longer than happy dreams. The chilling, magical forest of nightmares will stay in your memory much longer. Soon all the conversation revolved around Count Lopez throwing a ball. After all, it was he who recently fired his servants because he declared bankruptcy. But they said he paid his debt in one go, so all of society gathered at his ball to check if it was true. A young man suggested that everyone was there thanks to a special gift. No one knew what special gift was being talked about. "Oh my!" exclaimed the young man upon receiving the program in his hands. There were excerpts from a song written by the late Count Eduardo Lopez himself. The guests were amazed that such a treasure was put into their hands. They had different melodies on the programs with different titles. It seemed very interesting. Edward tapped his glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. He said he could see that the guests enjoyed the surprise. It had been almost 10 years since his grandfather's death. And for him, these gifts were an opportunity to share the memory of an exceptional talent with others. Some might say that Edward was frivolously throwing precious legacies to waste. But he himself didn't think so. If he keeps it to himself, only the Lopez family will mourn their grandfather. But if he shares this music, then his memory will live in the hearts of other people. That's why Edward announced that he will perform the third part of the fantastic trilogy of the Butterfly at the upcoming Foundation Festival. The spectators couldn't believe what they were hearing about the fantastic trilogy of the Butterfly, the last masterpiece created by the great virtuoso. It turns out that he was actually working on the third part before his death. Eduardo said that Eduardo Lopez, unfortunately, did not manage to finish the composition before his death. He completed it himself, although he was no match for his grandfather. He hoped the guests would like it. To improve the reputation of the Lopez family, Edward had to be the center of attention at the festival. At that moment, the arrival of the Duchess of Heidelberg was announced. Elena ran to Ariana with an exclamation of joy. She exclaimed that she was very happy to have come and gratefully hugged her tightly. Ariana responded clumsily to the gesture. The guests began to whisper that the sisters seemed to be friends, which meant that what Elena said about Luca's pedigree was true. Elena thought that it seemed she hadn't played the victim role in vain. Since Ariana came here, it means she believed it too. Looking around, Elena asked where her lordship was, but Ariana replied that she had come alone. Elena thought so. She had long been tired of Ariana being like this. But she asked out loud why her sister came alone when it would have been better if she came with her husband. After all, this was Ariana's first public appearance as the Duchess of Heidelberg. Ariana knew Elena would say that. She replied that she was only visiting her family. It wasn't worth calling it going out into high society. Elena agreed that she might be right, and Ariana noticed the tiara she was wearing. Ariana noticed that the tiara belonged to her. She said she was glad her sister was wearing it. Elena always liked to wear her things, just like men. Elena's face flushed with anger and shame. Ariana. Edward ran towards his sisters shouting. He couldn't believe that thief dared to show up here again. The guests began to whisper even louder. Edward declared that Ariana's appearance was an incredible surprise for him because he hadn't even sent her an invitation, believing she would be too busy. And Ariana replied that she would always find time for his protection, and she intended to protect her grandfather's works because she didn't understand how Edward had even thought of getting rid of his music in that way. Edward fiercely protested, saying that he was in charge of the Lopez family property, and that Ariana was no longer a Lopez and had no right to interfere. Ariana said that then Edward should also give her a gift. Like everyone else, even if she is no longer a Lopez, she is still one of the guests. Eduardo ordered the program to be delivered to the Duchess. The butler handed a piece of music to Ariana. Ariana unfolded it and looked at what was written. Elena realized with a laugh that there was even some kind of drawing on that piece of paper, and Ariana said that it was her. On the edge of the score, there was a drawing of a little girl with the same pigtails that Ariana once wore. The guests understood from this conversation that, apparently, the Duchess was close to the late Count Eduardo. It was all so sad. They felt very sorry for the Duchess. A female guest approached Ariana and told her that the piece she had received also showed a girl with pigtails, and Ariana confirmed that it was her. The guest handed the piece of paper to Ariana and asked her permission to return it if she had known how important it was to her. She would never have taken it. Other guests also began to give Ariana their musical fragments, and the girl apologized to them as she did not want them to feel guilty at all. No one understood why Count Lopez had given this to the guests because of her. They had annoyed his grace upon hearing this. Edward thought that Ariana had remained a petty and vile snake. He approached his sister and asked if he could talk to her. They went out to the guest room, and after the door slammed shut, Edward shouted that he didn't understand what the hell Ariana was doing. Ariana said he should ask her how she could distribute her grandfather's work in pieces as if they were cheap flyers. She asked if Edward had hidden the fantastic trilogy of the Butterfly. It seemed Ariana was really angry. Edward had never seen her so emotional before. It was as if she had managed to touch him deeply. Edward affirmed that he hadn't hidden anything anywhere. He was the owner of that house. The entire property belonged to him. Ariana assumed he meant that he also had the same score. Edward didn't understand what score she was talking about. Ariana shouted at him to stop pretending, since she knew perfectly well that the fantastic trilogy of the Butterfly was not his final work. Ariana was talking about her true final masterpiece, the score he was working on right before his death. Edward thought about it. He knew nothing about his grandfather's last true masterpiece. This is what Ariana was looking for. This unpleasant old man always favored her more than anyone. And now it turns out that he even dedicated a song to her. He could pretend to have the score and then find out more so he could properly register the house. "Ah," he said, "this is the score we were talking about," and then he assured me that. Naturally, he had it. Ariana shouted that it was hers, so Edward had to give it to her, because her grandfather wrote it based on the first melody she created. It was her music. If they don't give it to her, she will find it herself. "Back off," Ariana shouted. She intended to personally inspect the safe in the office, but Edward had declared that there was nothing in there. Ariana tried to push him aside and shouted that she would inspect everything herself, both the safe and the secret compartment inside it. Edward learned with some curiosity that there was such a compartment inside the safe. Ariana recognized that look on him. He always looked like that when he stole her music. It was the look of a greedy thief, but this time greed will be his downfall. At that moment, the guests saw Duke Heisenberg striding purposefully across the ballroom. Dante said he had heard that his wife was somewhere there and wanted someone to tell him where to look for her now. Everyone started whispering about where the Duchess had gone. If she hadn't gone to talk to the Count, the Viscount suggested looking for her. Elena couldn't believe the Duke was there because of Ariana. The Viscount ran to the Duke, assuring him that it was an honor for him to see his lordship again. But the Duke interrupted his heated speech, replying that, unfortunately, he was not in the mood to exchange pleasantries. Because several hours had passed since he last saw his wife, the guests began to whisper that everyone had said the Duke was cold to his wife. It seemed these rumors were false. "That's right," said the Duke, and his heavy hand fell on the Viscount's shoulder. He wanted to know where his wife was, and the Viscount replied that the Duchess had gone out for a private talk with Count Lopez. Dante repeated this very severely, causing fear in his interlocutor. At that moment, the butler approached his lordship and offered to take him to the Duchess. Edward and Ariana heard a loud bang at the door, and Edward shouted that they hadn't finished talking yet. But this didn't stop the one trying to enter their house at all. Duke Heisenberg appeared at the door and asked if this was his pathetic brother-in-law. Ariana looked into the Duke's eyes with fear. His gaze frightened her. The Duke grabbed Edward and shouted that he dared to make his wife cry. Edward thought the Duke hated his wife. That's not why he locked her in his house. But his behavior was definitely not what Edward expected. Dante growled that from now on, he advised Edward to be more careful with his comments towards Ariana. His wife might be magnanimous enough to let her brother get away with a minor offense, but the Duke himself was not. "Yes," Edward murmured in horror. As the Duke and Duchess walked down the corridor together, Ariana asked him what brought his lordship there, and Dante replied that her words had broken his heart. His hand went to Ariana's waist and pulled her towards him. Dante said that she simply left him no other choice but to come here himself. Ariana heard everyone discussing the love with which the Duke looked at his wife. Even the spectators blushed. Ariana noticed that she was going to return before nightfall. "Of course," Dante said with a smile, and recalled that Ariana would play for him again today. They arrived at the mansion. The butler greeted the Duke and Duchess of Heisenberg. The maid asked if she should prepare a bath for the lady. Ariana thanked her and said she would go straight to the music room. Sophie said that for some reason she thought so. And then the maid saw that the Duke would go with Ariana. All the servants of the mansion gathered to watch this scene. In the music room, Ariana immediately sat down at the piano, and Dante settled on the sofa. When the girl asked him if he would sit like that the whole time, the Duke said yes. Ariana reminded him that she had already told him that she couldn't concentrate at all in his presence. "Liar," said Dante, pointing out that once Ariana started playing, she would forget he existed. She thought, here it is, getting out of this again. She had to concentrate, she had to ignore him. There was so much to do. Ariana had been working on this song for the past month, but there was one part she wasn't happy with. It's about a scene where the main character, a little girl, is immersed in the festive atmosphere. The passage should sound fun and elegant, but at the same time a little strange and creepy. Still, feeling delight and overwhelming excitement for the first time in my life was a special moment. Dante looked at her questioningly. He approached her and asked what problems had arisen. Ariana replied that she was unable to convey the necessary emotion. They say that deep happiness and sadness can be the same thing, and that is what she wanted to convey. Dante asked her if she wanted to know what it felt like to feel so good that you wanted to cry, and Ariana thought that was different from what she had just said. Dante leaned towards her and told her that he would teach her everything if she wanted, that he would do everything in his power to help her. Ariana was annoyed because she was completely helpless in front of him when he teased her. She asked him if he was really familiar with those emotions. Dante replied that he certainly did more than her. Besides, he was older. She asked him to teach her if he could. Ariana whispered that she wished she knew what it was like to feel those emotions. Her heart beat wildly as Dante leaned closer to her. The next moment, the Duke kissed the girl. At the Lopez house, Edward also had something to think about. Mr. Leonard, who came to see him again, assumed that the Count must be irritated. He found out that Edward was going to present the Butterfly Fantasy Trilogy at the festival. Edward said that of course it would be a premiere. It would definitely be a success. Mr. Leonard had nothing to worry about. "What a pity," said Mr. Leonard, and Edward didn't understand what he meant. Mr. Leonard said he hoped Edward would perform his own piece. Edward himself would have liked that. He racked his brains thinking about it for 3 days. But for a sensitive-souled creator, there is nothing worse than tight deadlines. Edward said he was sure the festival guests would enjoy it. But Mr. Leonard said he was sorry. But if Eduardo intended to perform this particular piece, then he withdraws his patronage. Mr. Leonard explained this by saying that he was going to support Edward, and not the old man who was already resting in his grave. He asked for all the money he had lent him to be returned before the previously agreed deadline, and then he turned around to leave. Edward tried to stop him and grabbed his elbow. He said he would perform his piece later. After this conversation, Edward slammed his office door shut. He ran around it, thinking about Ariana's words. If we believe her words, there was another hiding place behind the safe. Desperate, he knelt in front of the safe, unable to solve this problem, and he was found there by the butler, who asked what the gentleman was doing. Edward turned sharply. He assumed that the butler knew everything about the existence of the hiding place, as he was so calm. He shouted that no one dared to hide anything from the head of the house, and with these words he hit him. The butler replied that everything in there was Mr. Eduardo's personal belongings, and that they did not represent any particular value. "Open the safe or you're dead," Edward said harshly, adding that the butler must choose wisely, because he wouldn't let him die quickly. The butler said he would open this hiding place for the master. Eduardo noticed that it was a good decision and ordered it to be carried out quickly. The butler pressed the secret parts on the safe door. The mechanism worked, and the hiding place opened with a click. "Get out of the way," Edward growled, running towards the hiding place. There really were notes there. The last masterpiece of the great virtuoso. Edward's heart began to beat wildly. Maybe this thing was even more valuable than the Butterfly Fantasy Trilogy. At that moment, in Duke Heisenberg's mansion, Dante sat by the window in his office and thought about Ariana. She just needed to find inspiration, to feel something she had never experienced before. He was so hasty that at that moment, Mr. Lee knocked on the door and the Duke allowed him to enter. He entered and reported that he had just finished the job his lordship had entrusted him with. As expected, as soon as he said he would only finance his own work, Edward immediately changed his mind and declared that he would present his own piece at the festival. Leonard said Edward sounded very confident. Leo was truly amazed by Lady Ariana's ingenuity. The Duchess flawlessly predicts the enemy's moves. He was also impressed by the determination with which she implements her plans. He assumed she could become an excellent military strategist. Dante sadly told his assistant not to waste time on such nonsense, and he asked if that was all he wanted to say. Leo reminded the members of the Dawn League they had been pursuing. Those who had escaped after their connection with the Froken pawnshop had been exposed, and they had managed to capture one of them alive this morning. Only he said something quite strange. He said that, indeed, a group of mercenaries was sent to the Farge forest that night, but that he was not among them. Leonard said that the Duchess had no reason to take revenge on him, and that was strange. It was in the Farge forest, where Ariana's grandfather and mother died in an accident. The Dawn League traveled to Farge to carry out an assassination attempt, which they thought would cause Ariana to seek revenge on them. It turned out they killed them. It was definitely an order from someone. Leo asked if he should tell Lady Ariana this, but the Duke replied not yet. He also ordered everyone to be warned not to dare touch him, but Leo objected that they hadn't discovered almost anything. The Duke replied that from now on, he himself would interrogate the man. The day the Foundation Festival begins has arrived. The flow of carriages seemed simply endless, and this was completely understandable. Because the Foundation Party was the pride of the empire, the people from the End Kingdom looked so unusual that one might assume that next year the same outfits would become a hit among the residents of the capital. From one of the carriages stepped out a young man, whom they immediately recognized as the eldest prince of the Kingdom of End. Many had heard that he was a great art expert, but few knew that he was so handsome. Suddenly, everyone's attention focused on a strange carriage. This carriage also stopped among other guest carriages. Someone identified the delegation from the Kingdom of Kalka. No one expected them to be represented at the Foundation Party, as they were rather reserved. But one could assume that they had been invited by Duke Heijenberg. Many had heard that he had made an alliance with them. It was said that the Kalkans kept snakes as pets and drank wine from the skulls of the barbarians they killed, all of which seemed like a real nightmare. The delegation was led by Tommen, the commander-in-chief of the Kingdom of Kalka. He had an exotic and wild appearance. He noticed Duke Heijenberg and turned to him. He greeted the Duke with a bow, and Dante politely replied that he was pleased to meet him, and he hoped Tommen had arrived without incident. Tommen wanted to know who the lady standing next to the Duke was. Dante introduced Ariana as his wife and Duchess of Heijenberg. "A pleasure to meet you, my name is Ariana," said the girl looking at her new acquaintance. She said she hoped the guests would have a good time in the Empire. Tommen knelt down and asked the lady the honor of allowing him to dedicate the Oath of the Desert to her. The Duke, suddenly enraged, demanded that Tommen stop talking nonsense and get up from the floor before he hit him. Tommen smiled widely at these harsh words. He apologized for startling her, and then he explained that the Kalkans dedicate the Oath of the Desert to the most wonderful person they know in their lives. And since Ariana was the wife of Duke Heijenberg, the savior of their people, Tommen would be extremely happy if she accepted this oath. What the hell will he do? The Duke growled, protecting Ariana with his body. Ariana was scared because this was a representative of another country, and because of this situation, rumors could spread that the Duke was acting arrogantly. Ariana intervened and said she had heard that Kalka was incredibly beautiful. Rumors also circulated about Tommen's worth on the battlefield, and that the Kalkans value their honor, and they do not tolerate rude treatment, especially when it comes to the desire to possess something that belongs to another person. With a bow, Tommen confirmed that Ariana was absolutely right. Tommen smiled and said that they, the Kalkans, always favor those who know the value of respect. He hoped that when Ariana visited Kalka someday, she would see this. Only Dante declared that it would never happen, and he could guarantee his wife's safety without any oath. "Come on, Ariana," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder and then leading her away. Ariana asked Dante if they could leave the man there, since he was only being polite to her because she was the Duke's wife. But Dante replied that there was no need to worry. It wasn't about politeness. This man simply thought Ariana was very beautiful. Many people don't know it, but the Kalkanian people are simply crazy about people with a beautiful appearance. Ariana asked Dante if he thought she was beautiful. "What?" Dante asked again, in such a tone that Ariana regretted asking it. She herself didn't really understand what had driven her to ask such a question. Now she only felt awkwardness. The Duke grabbed her and pulled her to him. He asked her never to make that face when they were in public. After all, she was simply driving him crazy. He could barely contain himself. Ariana remembered those kisses and everything that happened between them. Maybe she shouldn't have asked him those things. "Sir," a voice suddenly reached them. The assistant said that the Duke needed to appear in the interrogation room. Dante turned to Ariana. She told him that everything was fine, that she would talk to the other guests while he was away. Dante said that if anyone told her something stupid, she should teach them a lesson. She could safely use the Duke's power and status as she wished. With these words, the Duke left, leaving Ariana somewhat confused. "Hello, Ariana." She suddenly heard. "I was looking for you," said Alina, who had approached her, dressed luxuriously. Ariana noticed that Alina looked good. The trading company must be making good profits. Alina said that, when the ship returns, she and Edward will be much richer than before. Ariana should have listened to Adolf's words, as she did. Alina commented that she had heard that His Majesty had commissioned Ariana to perform at the Foundation Festival. At the closing ceremony. "That's right," Ariana confirmed. Alina leaned closer to her and wished her good luck, although she expressed doubts that Ariana could achieve anything with traders. And a boor from the town as her assistants. Alina said she just didn't want her sister to try too hard, since anyway, her next performance would overshadow the previous one. Ariana advised Alina, with a smile, not to be so arrogant. What did Alina ask again, frowning? Ariana asked her sister if she really believed that she had discovered all the evidence of Alina's connection with Lucas. Alina didn't understand what she was talking about because it seemed to her that there was no more evidence. Ariana smiled and said that she even knew that Alina had taken drugs to induce pregnancy. What nonsense! Alina shouted furiously, but quickly composed herself. She looked around and then asked why Ariana was saying those things. Ariana replied that sooner or later Alina would find out. She said goodbye to her and told her they would see each other again. She was going to enjoy the show from the front row. At that moment, the Duke entered that same room. "Look who has finally arrived," said the Emperor. Dante asked if this was really the leader of the Dawn League. They told him he had been one for 10 years now. The Emperor said that it seemed all the murder cases revolved around him. So there was a possibility that he also had something to do with that incident. Dante asked if this was the man who had harmed his wife. The tone of the Duke made the criminal tremble. Dante commented that maybe the others should leave the room. He feared that what he was about to do was not a pleasant sight. The Emperor decided to follow this advice and got up from his chair. He said he believed Duke Hagenberg would succeed and asked to make sure to report when everything was over. The second person present, the Crown Prince, said he would stay because this man was not a petty criminal, but a traitor to the Empire, and at least one member of the imperial family should be present at the interrogation. "As you wish," said Dante. The prince looked angrily at the Duke's back. He thought he was too insolent for an illegitimate son because he was his father's favorite. He was oblivious to the due respect owed to the heir of the Empire. Dante took a few more steps towards the criminal. He tore off the blindfold that prevented him from speaking. The criminal exclaimed that they should kill him because he had nothing to tell them. Dante replied that another member of the Dawn League had already confessed to the murder from the previous night. He said it was about 10 years ago that the League was hired to remove Count Lopez, but the man swore he had nothing to do with it. He convinced the Duke to believe him. Dante demanded to know who hired him to kill Eduardo Lopez. A sharp blade was found in the criminal's throat. "Go ahead, kill me," the man shouted. He was still not going to say a single word to a butcher like the Duke, someone who voluntarily went to the field to kill people. The Duke used the weapon he held in his hand. He said it was true, he really killed many, that's why they called him the Butcher. This meant that he knew exactly where to strike to make a person talk. Then he asked again who wanted Eduardo Lopez dead. Dante thought the man had a strange look in his eyes, as if there was something he feared more than torture and deaths. He moved the blade towards the wound inflicted on the criminal again. "I'll tell you," the criminal shouted. The pain made him speak. He even started to say the right name, but he didn't have time. Something distracted the Duke for a moment. Dante quickly turned around. The throwing star flew towards the criminal's throat, cutting off his words. "And life." He coughed up blood. The Duke looked towards the opposite door. Dante could only confirm that the man was dead. The prince began to call the guards, shouting that there was an intruder there. He wanted to know who dared to let an intruder into the imperial palace. But the criminal almost told them the client's name.